Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Oh. All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Board of Education. This meeting is being televised live on AACPS TV and streamed on AACPS YouTube channel. General information and protocols for the meeting are posted on the sign by the doorway as you enter the room, so please make sure you read those if you have not already. And I'd like to extend a special welcome to Troop 382 that's here from Arnold. Good evening, gentlemen. All right. Item 2.01, the invocation. O God, we pray to administer that which is just in all educational policies, being ever mindful of your guidance. Stir us to action with love, wisdom, and understanding. The pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Item 2.03, approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Do I have consensus? Thank you. Item 2.04, establish agenda order.
Move forward with agenda as written.
Do I have consensus? Thank you. Item 2.05, recognitions. I believe we do not have any this evening. Thank you. We will move to item 3, public comments. Thank you. Speakers will be allotted 2 minutes each and may not allocate their time to others. The yellow light behind me will shine when you have 30 seconds remaining. The red light, the red light below me will shine and you will hear a tone when your time has expired. The board asks that comments remain civil and appropriate for the various audiences that may be watching or viewing this meeting. Student-specific and personnel matters are confidential and cannot be discussed in this forum. Please speak only on the topic on which you signed up to speak. It is not the board's general practice to engage in question and answer sessions with speakers. For the record, please give your name before speaking. Handouts should be given to the board assistant. And if I may just add, with regard to civility, it is our goal here to behave as we would expect any one of our students to behave. So that includes no ad hominem attacks, no labeling of anyone whose views you do not agree with, whether that be a group or an individual, and no raising of voices. Thank you. So first, I will call on item 4.01, 2022-2023 Student Transportation Opt-in Registration Program, Ms. Lisa Van Buskirk and Ms. Holly Kleiderlein.
Good evening. Board of Education. I'm Lisa Van Buskirk of Start School Later, Anne Arundel County. I look forward to the presentation on the proposed opt-in for bus transportation. It's hard to speak before the presentation, of course. My predecessors suggested to your predecessors surveying parents about intended ridership circa 2013. I'm pleased that 9 years later, we're moving in that direction. There are, of course, valid concerns regarding whether implementing an opt-in system for transportation is equitable. First, though, we must acknowledge that the current transportation system is not equitable. I assume staff will address the efforts that the school system will make over the next few months to reach out to all populations using all tools available, including bilingual facilitators, community ambassadors, and staff at schools who are generally familiar with which students are riding the buses, to ground truth responses and to maximize the response rate so as to provide the most accurate data for the routers. Might even those least inclined or able to respond to the survey be automatically signed up for their bus seat? While it would be a luxury to provide bus service to all students eligible, regardless of whether they ride the bus or not, we are not operating in a luxury condition. Will the county executive and county council fully fund the request for 23 additional buses and 8 vans? We won't know that answer till the middle of June. And those buses won't be available right away. Best case, maybe late next school year or the following school year. Despite efforts to train and hire more bus driver shortages remain a concern for next school year. It's my understanding that school systems that implemented an opt-in system and effectively used their bus routing software did not have significant bus driver shortages. Neither of these tools were available to AACPS this school year, but are for next year. House Bill 283, should it pass the Senate this legislative session, realizing there's only a few days left though, requires that buses be routed so the number of pupils doesn't exceed seating capacity. We know we have more students than bus seats. Implementing an opt-in system would allow us to meet the intent of House Bill 283, but more importantly, would prevent us from having students sitting or standing in the aisles of overcrowded buses. I look forward to hearing more from the staff regarding an opt-in system. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Clatterline.
Good evening, Dr. Alato, President Tobin, and board members. My name is Holly Clatterline, and I'm one of the school counselors at Oak Hill. Regarding the opt-in transportation program, if I'm understanding this correctly, families will have to indicate through some method that they intend to utilize school bus for transportation next year. If that's accurate, I'm very concerned. Maybe you forgot last spring when you sent out surveys to find out the exact same thing. Do you remember how upset the board was over how few families had filled it out? I do, because the directive came down that we needed to get more families to indicate yes or no to buses. It became a workload issue due to the hours spent trying to get answers. We were blind to the results, so there was no way to find out who had clicked the link. Have you noticed how our free and reduced meal numbers have declined? It's not because there are fewer students living in poverty. It's because families are not filling out the forms because lunch is free. Do you realize how many students who needed to get into summer camp last year didn't get in? It's because the parents who had easy access to the form filled it out so quickly that the slots were gone before other families even knew that summer camps were available. Every time you require a form to provide resources to students, it's the students who have access to the least number of resources who get shut out. You are creating a barrier to equity with an opt-in program. Think about the logistics. Families who never completed the form will still send their kids to the bus stop. The bus driver can either stop and pick them up, making them late for all the other stops, which will result in angry emails, or they can pass by the students and the stop is not on their route, which will result in angry emails. Think about how the concern in equity goes away if you make it an opt-out program. Those parents who have the privilege of knowing what their work schedule is next year, have transportation of their own, and can check their phone multiple times a day at work can decide whether or not their children really need the bus. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to call the following on item 5.02, Superintendent Search Committee Report, Mr. Adam Wyndham. Item 5.03, School Start Times Report, Ms. Lisa Van Buskirk. And item 5.06, Superintendent's Report, School Operations, Mr. Greg Thrasher and Mr. Adam Wyndham.
Am I first?
Yes.
So minor mix-up. I thought I signed up for operations and the bus issue. So my first speech is actually going to be on the previous topic, if you don't mind.
That's okay.
Sorry about that. Good evening, Adam Wyndham. From what I remember, points were made about reducing the number of needed buses when Prismatic previously brought up this bus opt-in program last year. Assuming this pretext, I support the move towards an opt-in system for buses, as it will potentially save money, reduce pollution and the carbon footprint. We already have an opt-in for public school when we register every year. And just yesterday, I had an opt-in once again for special education services. Buses also don't run full routes for all special education students for that one small chance a student who doesn't normally ride the bus might ride the bus. Special education students have to opt in for transportation. From this perspective, it's discriminatory to run routes for general education students who don't regularly ride the bus and not for special education students. However, if the purpose of the opt-in program is solely for the benefit of school start times, I have reservations, as I have reservations about this change at school start times. Something that's impactful to the community probably should be put to a vote during the election and require more than a simple majority. You can say you're following the science on this, but science funded by the beverage industry once told us sugar wasn't bad for us. As a teenager, I remember if I wanted more sleep, I went to bed earlier. Today, teenagers, including my own 9-year-old, who's not even a teenager yet, is overly consumed by technology and the information age. This likely affects multiple facets of their life, including trouble sleeping. There's a number of lifestyle changes that can address what is typically referred to as insomnia. Changing the topic. I asked the board to stop deferring responsibility on legislation and immediately change the legislative program that is severely lacking on special education. This year in the MGA, AECPS wrote in opposition to 2 major bills that were intended to protect special education students. And I
Mr.
find that
Wyndham.
unacceptable.
Thank you. Ms. Van Buskirk?
Thank you. Good evening again. Lisa Van Buskirk, Start School Leader, Anne Arundel County. 2 weeks ago, during his testimony in the Senate Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs Committee regarding his permanent daylight savings time bill, Delegate Brian Crosby praised Anne Arundel County Public Schools for their realignment of school hours. Even if we may disagree with his view towards daylight savings time, you should be proud that he acknowledged your efforts. The Maryland Association of Boards of Education opposition letter to daylight savings time, while not naming Anne Arundel County specifically, also acknowledges your leadership on school hours. Quote, local boards of education have been responding to parent and student input in recent years to consider major revisions to the organization of the school day, focusing primarily on adopting later start times for high schools. System-wide reforms to adopt later school start times involve significant study and alignment of policies and budgets, providing necessary modifications to student transportation scheduling, number of school buses and drivers, and impacts on after-school activities. Last week, both an Anne Arundel County librarian and my kid's optometrist recognized my name from my too many op-eds and asked me if I thought school hours were really going to happen. I replied that this time it will because of your leadership. What is so different versus 2016 in the outreach? Not having to fight for $8 million in the budget, for one, and also I must applaud and acknowledge the tremendous progress with the help of Prismatic Services ACPS is making regarding its transportation system. Transportation is no longer the largest barrier to implementation like it was 6 years ago. I can only assume other barriers to implementation are being addressed behind the scenes, and I hope we'll learn more about proposed solutions and adjustments to school meals, activities, athletics, crossing guards, etc. during the outreach sessions. Childcare will, of course, be a concern for elementary families. Can, in conjunction with the opt-in system, school buses potentially be routed to pick up or drop off at childcare centers? That would be an out-of-the-box solution to something we know could assist our community. I look forward to learning more about the proposed outreach events to educate our community on why the board made its decision regarding school hours, the benefits of the change to student academic safety and health, and physical and mental health, while also acknowledging the necessary adjustments everyone will need to make to ensure successful implementation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Thrasher?
Good evening, board and the community at large. My name is Greg Thrasher. I'm a substitute teacher in the system. I appreciate this opportunity to provide my comments and recommendations to the Board of Education regarding the role of substitute teachers. Although some teachers, administrative staff, and others continue to provide outstanding efforts and services for the entire community, I applaud them all, including the Board of Education. Of late, the Board of Education in America has been under attack. Sometimes it feels like, I imagine you're in a classroom with, you don't know if it's a gold mine or a landmine, but it happens and this is reality. I am here to request that the board, before I do that, I do want to say this. I know you guys have an awesome responsibility. I respect you and I appreciate you. When you speak, people listen. I want to acknowledge the board for the resolutions they made for parents in the community, as well as acknowledgement of the Black Lives Matter. I appreciate that. I also want to thank the board for considering the budget proposal next year for increasing compensation for substitute teachers. I'm retired. Trust me, they need the money. Finally, I recognize and understand that the superintendent is responsible for day-to-day operations. That's his providence. I respect that as well. I would appreciate if the board would consider the following recommendations, pass them on to the superintendent. I'm available for some additional information. Quickly, 5 roles. I wish the board and people at large would elevate the role of substitute teachers. We're not just babysitters. We're not just sitting in a room doing anything. We matter. We care. We're educators. I wish there would be some CE credits for substitute teachers. I wish there'd be a uniform form where the teachers would give us lesson plans, uniform throughout the school. I also wish we could complete a uniform status report after we've done our substitution. Finally, you guys matter. I appreciate you guys. The Board of Education is a fundamental beacon for leadership in our community. When you speak, we listen. Please take a look at my notes. Appreciate it. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Mr. Wyndham.
Good evening again. In 2013, after 12 and a half years of active military service, I left the Air Force. During this time frame, many others were also separating early. So many of the voluntary early separation program had to be paused. Why did so many want to leave? In short, we were exhausted. A recent article states teachers are, quote, quitting their jobs at a record pace because of exhaustion. As I read various articles and comments from teachers, there are striking similarities in the exhaustion I saw 10 years ago and that of today. Leaving out the exhaustion of 10 years of wars that would continue for 10 more, we also were experiencing constant arbitrary changes, excessively increasing redundant paperwork, maintaining data in an increasing number of information systems that were plagued with constant glitches, increasing professional development from the latest fad, inability to discipline poor performers, general information overload, and more. And with every increase in our requirements, there was not a subsequent decrease in pre-existing requirements. There's only so much time in a day. And instead of recognizing this, the military at the time pushed out this buzzword we call resiliency, which came with more training, more meetings, more briefings, and more emails. In short, you are not a good service member if you are not throwing away your already limited personal time for, quote, the needs of the Air Force. Just like you're not a good teacher if you don't stay up to 1 a.m. grading, planning, reading, and studying. Some groups of people will tell you many solutions is more quality professional development training because 4 to 6 years plus of college was not already enough education. Teachers don't need more programs, more requirements, more reading, more buzzwords, or more PD. They need less.
Thank you. So I'd like to call up speaking on item 7.03, policy revision, public comment at board meetings, Ms. Holly Kleiderlein. And speaking on item 8.02, Piney Orchard Elementary, Mr. David, is it Heisel? I hope I didn't butcher that. Ms. Carolyn Fume, Ms. Alexandra Snyder, and Ms. Diana McMullen. Ms. Kleiderlein.
Hello again. My name is Holly Kleiderlein, and I'm one of the school counselors at Oak Hill. In order to speak tonight, I needed to fill out a form that required that I click on the agenda item I'm speaking about. I understand where this idea started. Individuals were causing disruption to the flow of business of the board. But things happen in real time that aren't on your agenda. I've been here before when there are concerns about start school later, bus stops, inadequate lighting or sidewalks, concerns about drinking water, and recess. Time and again, I've testified on the problem of inadequate student mental health resources. With this policy in place, I would not have been able to advocate all those times because it wasn't on the agenda. What you're doing by implementing this is making it seem like there are no concerns because no one's saying anything publicly and comments are not posted online for the public to read. But what recourse does the public or an employee to have to share concerns about an elected board's actions? These options are to write an article in the newspaper or email you. As an employee, I'm not allowed to make any disparaging remarks online, so that's left up to the parents on Facebook. You've struggled to keep up with emails and community concerns so much that you're willing to spend $120,000 on an ombudsman to be a liaison between you and the public. $120,000 would easily cover the cost of the NBCT salary enhancement for the school counselors who are NBCTs. But I'm not supposed to talk about that because it's not on the agenda. Will it be on the agenda before it's time for the budget to be finalized, or will it be on the agenda when it's too late for you to take actions to rectify it? I speak here because I know people are listening. A few years ago, just at the point I was giving up hope that anyone was paying attention, Linda Carter Ferrier encouraged me to keep advocating for more mental health resources. It might not always be on your agenda, but it's always on mine. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Heisel?
Ms. Heisel, would you like me to stand?
Oh, as you wish.
Thank you, members of the board, Dr. Arlotto. I want to just bring attention. My wife is present. As long as her child is, she's probably on some sort of tablet. But she's a fourth grader at Piney Orchard. She's been there since the beginning. Our family loves Piney Orchard. We love Anne Arundel County. We love the school. And thank you, school board, for giving us the opportunity. I'm just going to talk about what 150% capacity looks like. It's really kind of hard to imagine 150%. It doesn't really mean anything unless you're seeing it. I remember this winter, as you all probably can remember, it was really cold. And so I was driving my child along with a bunch of neighbors' kids to school every day and picking them up every day. We alternate with a couple of neighbors. Miss Barrett's here as well with her children. We would go there and the lines would be backing up, and we couldn't even get there in time. The crossing guards were basically saying, well, we have 20 minutes to cross these children, and then we got to go to Four Seasons, or then we got to go to Odenton Elementary School. And you have all these kids who are walking to school without parents, without crossing guards. Cars are coming in and out. Parents are trying to rush there, rush out, rush in. People aren't getting to school on time. It's just a real safety concern. And I think aside from the obvious, hey, the cafeteria is too full, the gymnasium's too full, the library is too full, the playground's being changed because there are pods there. My child would come back and say, well, we couldn't really go out today because it was too muddy in the field and there wasn't enough room, you know? Or I had 10 minutes to eat. I got in my lunch line, and by the time I got my lunch, 10 minutes to eat. And children, as you know, they don't eat really fast. I'm going to tell you this real quick anecdote. It's probably hard to imagine that I probably got in trouble a lot when I was a little kid, right? My mom would sit me down, and she was not one with the, lay down with the iron fist. She would talk to me and she would say, look, why did you do the thing you did? Why did you make that choice that you made? I don't know. I kind of hung my head down. Like, I don't want to say anything. Please stop. And she said, you know what a wise decision is? And I said, well, what's a wise decision, Mom? She goes, a wise decision is two things. One, a wise decision is not always the easy decision. And number two, a wise decision is made when you take the time to understand and appreciate how that decision, if made today, will impact you and other people tomorrow. So I'm urging this board to think about that when it makes this decision tonight, about how this decision will impact the children, the parents, the teachers, the crossing guards, the community moving forward. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Fumi?
Good evening. My name is Carolyn Fumi. I was the Arundel High representative to the Crofton Redistricting Committee. As of today, Piney Orchard has 961 kids. Next year, the estimate is 1,050, which is 161% capacity. That is larger than 10 of your 19 middle schools without the physical building of a middle school. The common areas of this school are designed for kids of 611. These students have essential needs that this district must address, and we have some concerns we'd like to raise with you. Number one, we respectfully request that Dr. Arlotto authorize principals to accept out-of-area transfers for kids zoned from Piney Orchard for the next 2 years. All schools up to 110% capacity should be open to Piney students. The current deadline for out-of-area transfers for next year is 25 days away. Therefore, Dr. Arlotto, we ask you to make this decision quickly and communicate it with Piney families and current principals as quickly as possible. Number two, Piney needs additional teacher and administrative resources. They have less special education, literacy, counseling, and speech support as schools half their size. Another assistant principal is needed. They need one special educator per grade, and they need 3 literacy teachers, TAs, custodial, and lunch monitors. The parking lot is out of code compliance by 30 spots. A gravel lot request was recently denied. It needs to be reconsidered and approved. Please keep West County Elementary School construction on track and on time. It cannot come soon enough. Piney Orchard is an amazing school with hardworking, dedicated teachers and staff. My kids got an excellent education at Piney, and they're in a good college right now. Please give my neighbors and my friends the same quality education at Piney.
Thank you. Ms. Snyder?
Good evening. Thank you, Board and Dr. Arlotto. My name is Alexandra Snyder, and I am the mother of 2 children at Piney Orchard Elementary. On the Anne Arundel County Public Schools website, there's a statement: the safety and well-being of students, staff, and visitors is paramount at Anne Arundel County Public Schools. As a parent of 2 students at Piney Orchard, I have a hard time reconciling this statement with what I see every day at my daughter's dangerously overcrowded school. In the lunchroom, students are crammed into a cafeteria with barely enough time to get through the lunch line before they're ushered out onto the cramped playground. My youngest daughter has been to the school nurse multiple times this year, complaining of stomach aches that are alleviated with just a few bites of the lunch she didn't get to finish. With 1 in 6 children in the U.S. estimated as being food insecure, it's egregious that one of the only meals these students may get is rushed and inadequate. On that crowded blacktop, an 8-classroom portable takes up a large portion of the playground. Just the other day, I was at the school, not to take pictures for the yearbook like I often am, but to pick up my oldest daughter whose nose was broken at recess. Another child, trying to play a typical recess game, smashed into her and left her bloodied, bruised due to the lack of space to safely play. She may require surgery to correct the damage. And yet another portable is slated to be added to that space and replace the only playground equipment on the premises next year, meaning while my daughter's injury was incredibly traumatic, it's unlikely to be the last. Additionally, portable classrooms themselves have intrinsic safety concerns. The modular buildings are isolated and vulnerable during school lockdowns, and the area the existing Piney portable is in has just one egress, which hundreds of children would need to access in an emergency. Unfortunately, it's not just the physical safety of our students being put at risk in this untenable and frankly outrageous situation. Studies from UCLA and the National Association of School Boards found overcrowding reduces students' ability to pay attention and increases school violence. In schools with over 130% capacity, like Piney, there is a clear negative impact on reading achievement, and the rates of teacher and student absenteeism are higher. If the board and district really means what they say on their website and in these meetings, you must allocate more resources and attention to this issue. Do it for the safety of our kids.
Thank you. Ms. McMullen?
Good evening, Dr. Arlotto, Board of Education. My name is Diana McMullen, and I'm the parent of an 8th grader at Piney and a 4th grader at Piney and an 8th grader at Arundel Middle. I have been involved with the systemic issues in the Arundel cluster since 2018 when the Crofton High School redistricting occurred. The overcrowding situation at Piney Orchard Elementary is the direct result of the 2019 redistricting that was approved by the board following the superintendent's recommendations. I've provided a handout package to you tonight showing how AACPS has chronically underestimated the enrollment projections around students coming to Piney Orchard. The current enrollment projection for fall of 22 is 255 students higher than the number provided to inform the decisions in the redistricting committee. In 2018 and 2019, I spent many hours with Scott Schuler and testifying to this board explaining that the projection numbers were low and was repeatedly dismissed by you and the team led by Mr. Shoknovich. We are currently looking at 1,050 students to be housed in a school built to educate 611. This will put Piney Orchard at 162% state-rated capacity for fall of 22. While we understand that Piney Orchard is intended to be a holding school until West County Elementary is built, the disservice that you are doing to over 1,000 students over 3 years should be embarrassing. I know that I am only one person standing here tonight, but I represent a much larger group. I'm the founder of the Advocate for the Arundel Cluster Facebook group. We currently have over 900 members. We published a survey to the group to discuss the possible relief to the school. We had almost 300 responses, with 194 being from self-identified Piney families. I've also included those results in the handout. As a group, we are frustrated that the Board of Education has placed us in a situation where there's no information being shared with the families as to how the school system will ensure our children are not just safe, but also in a place where they can thrive. It is your job to provide multiple solutions to correct this unsafe learning environment. Thank you.
Thank you. And we now will move to virtual testimony. I think they're getting set up as we speak.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the virtual portion of our public comment this evening. Speakers will be allotted 2 minutes each and may not allocate their time to others. Ms. Howe, we will indicate when your time has expired. The board does ask that comments remain civil and appropriate for the various audiences that may be watching or viewing this meeting. Student-specific and personal matters are confidential and cannot be discussed in this forum. It is not the board's general practice to engage in question and answer sessions with speakers. For the record, please give your name before speaking. We have one speaker this evening speaking on item 5.03, Jennifer Sullivan.
Hi, good evening. As you stated, my name is Jennifer Sullivan. I'm an Anne Arundel County resident and parent. I signed up this evening to further express my concerns regarding the new school hours proposed for 22-23 school year. While I understand there's no one perfect, all accommodating schedule for our system for the residents and employees in the county, I'm bringing these concerns to the board in hopes that you'll consider and prioritize the importance of elementary age students getting the latest dismissal time. I appreciate the efforts put forth by the board and the importance of the Start School Later initiative. However, the consequence of implementing this program for only a fraction of the children will negatively affect the most vulnerable demographics of our community. Like many other families, I have elementary age students, and we rely on later dismissal times for several reasons. One, we rely for older siblings or older students to assist in caring for our younger children after school, and get them home safely before the parents or guardians' workday is complete. The new proposed departure schedule eliminates this as an option, resulting in financial burden for families now having to find childcare. The SACC is the most reasonably financial option. However, of the 79 elementary schools in Anne Arundel County, only 46 of those schools offer before and after care. And as of February, only 21 of those schools had any type of availability. The remaining 25 schools are all waitlisted. And now with the increase in demand for after school care in these schools that have been waitlisted already, many of these parent programs being staffed by high school students, what is the county proposing to accommodate these new demands? Lastly, the announcement made on February the 4th, 2022 came as a surprise to many who voted in the initial surveys in opposition of changing school times. Furthermore, the specific proposed time modifications were never shared with the community for further feedback before being announced. The board debated the issue last spring, had several presentations intermittently through the fall, and decided to proceed accordingly, but not based off of feedback from the community. These conversations were also being held during a global pandemic where many families couldn't wrap their heads around what the new normal would look like after the pandemic subsided. Unemployment, financial constraints, all of those things were in the forefront of many families, as opposed to diving into a proposed uncertain start time. So I'm asking for serious consideration to either modify the departure times to ensure that families of our younger children are set up for successful and a safe 2022-23 school year. Please leave the school time the same. Thank you so much for your time this evening. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. That does conclude the public portion virtual this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes public comment. We will now move to item 4, presentation on the Student Transportation Opt-in Registration Program.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. As Mr. Sheknovich makes his way to the well to present some information to you, I'll just, by way of reminder, it was many moons ago that in discussions about start times, there were conversations among board members and the public about efficiencies in our transportation system. And so of that, of the many things that have arisen from that conversation, one was the concept of an opt-in program, meaning, and I would give you an example before Mr. Sheknovich gets started, in that you've heard from constituents over the years that they see buses driving through their neighborhood that is a quarter full or a half full. And the question would be, why is that the case? Well, that's the case is because we determine, based on the board policy, what students are walkers and which students are able or can access school transportation. And based on those parameters, we then plan to transport all those students that are eligible. And that is typical of school systems around the country. You plan for all those that are eligible. And I think we have something around 68,000 students that are eligible for transportation, some round number somewhere around that. But when a student doesn't get on a bus because maybe they're not feeling well a particular morning, or they never get on the bus because their parents drive them to the bus, to school, or they're a senior and they got a parking space and they're driving themselves to school, then there are seats available on that bus. And therefore, as I'll go back to, efficiencies may be lost because that bus is running that same route, but not picking up that same number of students that it's scheduled to do. So that led to a further conversation, as I remind you, about possibly an opt-in scenario, not something that we have contemplated in Anne Arundel County in the past. So we were charged with, and the team moved forward over the last several months behind the scenes working on what something like that might look like, including identifying school districts that are like size to ours around the country that are implementing an opt-in program. And again, that being where if it is a family of a student that is eligible for transportation, would then be asked, do you plan to take advantage of that transportation for your student or not? An opt-in. It would be a confirmation that they plan on utilizing that transportation provided by this board and the school system. So with that, the team has done some investigatory work. We've done some planning that has heavily involved not just the transportation division, but our student data division and our technology division about how we might implement this program. Our plan is to move forward and implement an opt-in program for the 2022-2023 school year. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Sheknovich to give you some of the details.
Thank you, and good evening. For the record, my name is Alex Sheknovich, Chief Operating Officer. As the superintendent indicated, this is not a new matter. There are a number of school districts around the country that have and are actively using an annualized bus registration model. We reached out and had conversations with a number of them and did some additional research. Some of those include school districts such as Boulder and Denver, Colorado, Boston, Massachusetts, both Duluth and Minneapolis, Minnesota, and multiple school districts, both large and small, across Pennsylvania. It's very common in the state of Pennsylvania. Here more locally, the online registration process is really not something new for us here at Anne Arundel County Schools. As you remember, we did something similar when we transitioned back from fully virtual learning into the hybrid model, and then continue that on into the summer programs for 2021, again, sort of during the COVID. But even prior to that, as again, I believe Dr. Alato alluded to, the matter was also brought forward as a suggestion for the school district to evaluate and undertake by Prismatic Services, Inc., which is the consulting firm that this board retained to analyze transportation and to take a look at evaluations and opportunities to improve both efficiency and effectiveness within the transportation operations. So as Dr. Arlotto mentioned, on the 18th of August, 2021, this board charged the superintendent and the staff to quote unquote evaluate the feasibility of implementing a positive transportation opt-in program for all special need and non-homeless students for the 2022-2023 school year and to report back to this board at this meeting. We have done exactly that, and we're prepared to implement the mandatory bus registration program for this upcoming fall. So some of the benefits were alluded to earlier, but let me cover them in a little bit more detail so we fully can grasp some of the opportunities that can be yielded out of a bus registration model. Clearly, route efficiency. So when you're planning routes and stops only, for those students that are intent on utilizing the bus, you have an opportunity to eliminate underutilized or non-used buses. This reduction allows route planners to potentially shorten the duration of the routes or even combine some of the routes to make them both more time and cost efficient. There are certainly opportunities for efficiencies in terms of the overall size of the bus fleet. It may potentially allow us to reduce the total number of buses that are acquired, contracted, maintained, owned, and operated, thus minimizing the asset costs that we have to maintain and potentially providing us opportunities to redirect that revenue, right, those funds elsewhere here within the organization towards other strategic priorities that we have here within the school district. It is not no secret that, not only us, but within a region and across the land, we are facing driver shortages. And all the articles that I read and become an avid reader of CDL drivers stories. This is not a phenomenon that's really going to abate. And a number of the school districts we talked to actually said this is the very reason why they started it, this program just this year. Some have had it for many, many more years. Some of them moved into it this year because of the driver shortage. Certainly, again, lower ridership counts and more accurate counts allow us to fine tune not just the size of the fleet, but the drivers for the fleet. So where we can eliminate or combine buses, that lowers the total number of CDL certificated and licensed drivers that we need, thereby potentially allowing us some inroads into the national driver shortage. Another benefit that many districts espoused upon, and it's one certainly that we strive for here frequently, is address confirmation. It provides us yet another avenue to reconfirm not just the address of the students, but their physical pickup and drop off to make sure their routing is done accurately. We do have families here that have, custodial, split custody arrangements, things like that. This would much more effectively allow us to, honor, to not just become aware, but to reconfirm and honor those type of agreements, and thus not only being able to better serve the eligible students, but serve them really in a more accurate way and in a more fidelity-driven manner. So our plan is a number of considerations. It essentially sequentially operates like this. First, we do have existing policies and regulations that govern transportation. So in accordance with those policy and regulations, we would identify the eligible students and begin a communication process with them regarding the registration for bus services. That communication would be essentially confined to only those bus eligible students. We don't want to confuse somebody. Remember, we've got half a mile walking distance for kindergartners, a mile for elementary school, and a mile and a half. It really would just confuse somebody who's a secondary school student who only lives 0.3 miles from the school to even get them to form. So we can electronically remove and cull them out of the initial mailing, so we don't bother those families. We don't confuse those families at all. Certainly children who are special education and have an IEP related transportation accommodation, or our McKinney-Vento students would be identified in advance, and they would be registered in advance. We would take care of that on their behalf. Certainly they would receive confirmation of that, but we would take care of that in advance and not be reliant upon that family, the parent or guardian, to do that on their behalf. So we would essentially generate an electronic letter, and there will be a marketing communication plans that's part of that. I'm sort of skipping past that temporarily, but we would generate an electronic letter that would go to the parent or guardian of each one of those transportation eligible students, and that would have a secure and encrypted link that's unique to that student, thus precluding folks from forwarding, the link to others, et cetera, right? So that provides us with some integrity and security in terms of the survey. We would use their official point of contact, so their address of record, which is essentially the one that's used for grade reporting and all other legal and purposeful communications. That would be the destination for that outreach. And again, we understand and we would account for those special circumstances where we have shared, custody. We already routinely have a mechanism to communicate with those families. We do it routinely. We would do so here again. The information would go out in both English and Spanish, and we would use all of our available communication means. So think ConnectEd, right? Emails, the robocalls, the text. We would have a web presence. There would be a multi-modal communicative process where we would use all of our assets and tools to get that information out. And the information itself in the survey would be able to be filled out on a multitude of communication devices, i.e. it could be done on laptops or tablets, smart-enabled phones, Chromebooks, et cetera. So we're going to make the instrument as viable as possible for everyone, again, across the various platforms. But we know that it requires multiple communications, right? So we are going to communicate and over-communicate and repeat communicate the criticality, the importance, the necessity of this. One of the tools that we are developing as part of this project, though, again, along the same lines of not wanting to overburden any family. If a family responds to the survey the first time, right, the survey's filled out, it's been accepted, that family, that youngster's actually registration will be pulled out. So then when we recommunicate the next time, hey, there's this important thing, you got to fill the survey, they won't get bombarded again. So there's a second communication. Again, those to respond get pulled out again. So with each successive communication, there will be a smaller subset of parents and guardians that would receive this communication as well. But again, we would do that repeatedly in multiple ways on multiple occasions to establish the broadest awareness possible. We know that we're going to have to employ our resources at our schools. Our schools know our families best, and be they our community ambassadors, be they their bilingual facilitators, the admin team, the student services supports. We know the families that need additional outreach, that may need help with technology, et cetera. We have been supporting those families now for 2+ years. We will continue to do that, just like we have for any other vital or critical registration process here across the district. The intent would be to begin the survey or canvassing process in April. It's critical that we conclude that by June. We close our academic year out, be they grades, be they course selection, be they bus registration, et cetera. We sort of close that out at the end of June because we have to close those electronic student data records, and we need to roll them forward into the next year. So that's sort of the timeline. And again, there will be multiple opportunities where this will be over-communicated, re-communicated time and time again, but it does have to come to a close, and it would come to a close in June. The other thing I want to say is it's going to be based on your projected school of attendance for next year. So if you're a third grader and you're in a mile transport zone, you're going to be a fourth grader next year, right? That's easy. but a fifth grader that's going to leave the 1 mile elementary school walk distance and go to a sixth grade secondary school 1.5 mile parameter, we're going to project that forward. So that's going to be corrected within the system, both this spring during the canvassing and registration process, as well as the rollover. We know that there's an excessive amount of reality that occurs all year, right? We have families to move in. We have families not only to move in from out of state, but they move houses here within a district, right? They could move from Crofton to Shadyside or whatever sort that is. So there is clearly going to have to be a process to account for that. We've registered those youngsters, whether they're coming in from the state or they're coming in from another school. There is a registration and onboarding process at their new school, and this bus registration is going to be part of that registration process, just like for everything else that they are registering for. We also know there's hardships, and I'll give you just one example, truly made up, but there's only one licensed driver within the family, and that licensed driver just got military orders to ship out to Germany for 8 months. It happens. It happens to us today anyway. We'll be able to take an account for that. So hardship arrangements, we have a process. That communication really starts at the school, and our social service, student services and transportation divisions really already take into account. We call them exceptional transportation requests, but there's a process for that. It is important to note two last things. First of all, this will be an election for the entire year. We're not asking you to make an election only for the fall or for the spring. So it's going to be carefully worded. If you intend to use the bus at any point during the year, please say yes. We're happy for you to say yes. We'll save a seat for you. So it's not going to be, quarter by quarter, semester by semester. We're asking you to make a decision, and we'll encourage people, play it safe. If you think you may need to use the bus during the next year, certainly say yes, right? There's no downside to saying yes. We just want to make sure that you're, properly accounted for. So it is going to be for the year. The last thing I'll add is that, I do hear, and there may be some debate about an affirmative registration, i.e. an opt-in program versus opt-out. What we heard from everybody we spoke to and what Prismatic told us from their own experience and from others that they've talked to is you have to go with the affirmative opt-in. Quite frankly, most of the folks said, if you want to do opt-out, then don't even bother. Like, you're wasting a lot of effort. You're annoying a lot of people. Just don't even bother. If this is something you want to do, you need an affirmative registration. People have to register for calculus. They have to register for get into a magnet. They're going to register for a bus. This is not something atypical that our families aren't accustomed to. We're going to help them along with that. But again, pretty universally, they said if you're going to go the other way, then there's really very little utility of doing it. And honestly, you're probably going to create more mayhem than you're going to try to solve. So with that, I'll conclude my remarks. Mr. Superintendent, I don't know if I left anything out, but if not, then certainly we'll be open to dialogue with the board.
Thank you, Alex. We're glad to take questions.
Ms. Shawn?
Yes, thank you for all of that. I really appreciate it. I have just a couple succinct things to say, and then I do have a couple questions. And like I said, I'll try to be succinct as possible. While a lot of us were out of town, I wasn't. The outrage and the jumping to conclusions on social media in response to this agenda item was stunning. For years, decades even, folks have vocalized to us either the real or perceived shortcomings of the transportation department, such as my child's bus is painfully overcrowded, there are children sitting in the aisles, the route is too long, and this year the bus doesn't show. We, the board, with taxpayer money, hire transportation consultants to evaluate the transportation department and look at start times. The consultant does the work and makes more than 24 recommendations, ranging from encouraging us to enable our bus maintenance staff to become ASC certified, to writing standard operating procedures, to measures like this one that address capacity and efficiency. We need to know which children ride the bus. We need to be able to assign them to a bus stop and to a bus. This is no different than a passenger list from a train or a plane. It's as much as a safety measure as it is necessary for efficient routing while being fiscally responsible. So it's stunning to me that folks every year are concerned with the size of our budget and the quality of the services we offer. We make attempts to correct inefficiencies and be fiscally responsible while improving our services, and we get hammered for it. There are no bus slots that will get filled. We aren't limiting our ridership or circumventing our policies regarding bus ridership in walking areas. We can have a healthy conversation, this board, regarding whether an opt-in or an opt-out program is the most equitable and makes the most sense for us. We can discuss how we can ensure that we receive responses from our tough-to-reach families, or those that don't have internet, or those that don't speak English. We can have those conversations and make decisions that honor our mission of all means all, but let's do that, please, in a civil, logical way where we receive the information as we did just now, evaluate that information, and act on the information in the best interest of our students. So I just wanted to say that, because it was bananas on social media over the weekend, and it won't be an exercise I'm going to be as willing to engage in the future if it's going to be like that, because it was just stunning to me, and civility has definitely left the building. So now I just have a couple questions. As we evaluate this, and also as we implement healthy school start times, I just want to make for absolute certain that we'll continue to evaluate walking routes, it's the safety of walking routes and providing busing where they aren't safe and children live within the walking distance. So I'll just take Folger, for example. There's a huge area around Folger that would absolutely be walking 1,000% if it wasn't for the safety of Arundel Beach Boulevard, which is like the Audubon. So I just want to make sure that as we're doing that we're still looking at walking routes where they are safe and where they are not, and those children that might live within a walking zone but can't walk because of the safety.
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. That's the way we've routed and determined walkers versus bus riders for the last 20, 30 years, and that's not going to change going forward.
I just want to make sure everyone hears that, because again, it was bananas online. And just two more really quick questions, I hope. Second, if we're going to go as an opt-in system, can families opt in to be picked up or dropped off at a daycare facility, which, as many folks have alluded to, can be an out-of-box solution and also address some concerns we've had regarding childcare?
So we currently do that. There's a process to apply for that and have that vetted and approved, and we do not anticipate that changing. So the process, again, that we have had in place with that regard would continue on. That would not be affected by whether we did or did not move forward with this.
Cool. So I want to make sure everyone heard that as well, both in this room and at home. And then third, I just want to reiterate what I thought I heard you say, and that is, if we do, regardless of which method we do, opt in or opt out, that we'll deploy all of our resources to reach the families that are hard to reach and make connections with folks, especially folks that we know English might not be spoken at home, or that they're not, that they don't have internet, or they're not engaged because of their circumstances or otherwise, that we will work with those families regardless of whatever route we do.
Absolutely, and certainly, as you can well imagine, that's a skill or muscle memory that we've developed tremendously here over the course of the last 2 years. Right, we've gotten much better at that here, and we're committed to continue to improve, but do that with this project as well.
And I completely agree, and staff have been nothing short of amazing throughout this entire time that we are still living in. I thank you for that, and I'm sorry that took a few minutes. It's important for me to say that.
Yeah, I just want to remind members, normally we ask questions first and then do a round with comments. So, but now that Ms. Schalheim has done that, it opens for, that's okay, but it opens for comments for others as well. So, Ms. Corkadell.
Thank you. I noticed 3 questions, so I have 3, so I'm gonna roll the full here, I guess. Just give me a second because I had separated them to make sure we got all of our information before commentary. And so I'm going to ask my questions first and then just make a couple comments to proceed, reserving right, obviously, if anything new presented. And the first one is actually, I think, to a question to the board. The concerns that we have been hearing, number one is I am very compassionate to you, and I always want to hear from you. I don't stop at a volume, and I totally, these are a lot of your concerns are the same concerns that I have expressed throughout the entire conversation over multiple years. But on June the 2nd of 21, a motion was passed by this board that said the CAC establish a subcommittee to review the phase 2 findings presented by Prismatic, which includes this opt-in, to the board and report regularly to the board throughout until discharged by the board. Mr. Smith seconded it. It was adopted 6-2 with Ms. Schallheim, Ms. Antwine opposing, and everybody else in favor, no abstentions. And this has not occurred. Once something becomes an adopted thing of the board, it is up to the board to do. Back to the, I don't feel like my voice is being heard. I am very, very concerned that this was the only portal. The other motion was rejected to have any more hearings and interactions. This was supported, I believe, based on commentary. I would not speak to about any member, but as the motion author, I was doing that to give us something, at least a representative say to our people. This is not a commentary on the progress made and what we must now do and move forward, but I don't think it's too late to actually hear from our CAC. And I want to know why we haven't heard from them, when we are, and that this is going to persist in its duration. And I would like to know, and I think the public probably would want to, because this is an action of the board and nobody has the right to rescind it except for the board. And it must be followed through on. And I'm very concerned we haven't heard a thing. I know you were, we have had change in leaderships, but I would request that the board find out what happened, why it was not even brought to the board's attention, it was not occurring. Those are motions supposed to be tracked. And what we're going to do, I think maybe at the next meeting, we can tell our folks what we're going to do to remedy it. And so maybe not necessarily a question to be answered now, Dr. Tobin, but I think we owe everybody a follow-up on that. And thank you very much for your consideration of it. As it relates to the details, I do prefer opt-out versus opt-in, but I also recognize the operational components. And so I just want to say I remain concerned about the impact to staff. Every minute away from education, obviously we don't want to do. But it does sound like the stage in and the phase ins are something that we will be able to recognize and not see that impact in the future by investing the time in now. So thank you very much, Mr. Chiknovich. I will tell you, I have had a lot of concerns about the equitable pieces. We know that our underserved struggle to meet our objectives. That's just a fact. We know that. And that's why we have all of that extra support wrapping around. And I just want folks to know that I do recognize it. However, when I was doing my research, and I dug in on the opt-in, opt-out, I reached out actually to a couple of the districts asking what it's, would have any feedback from those board members respectively, and most actually returned my call. And so I felt a little more comfortable about it, but the ones that reported the most success had the 3-day. my circumstances changed. And so they fill out a form establishing that, and the school commits to them that within 3 days, business days, that they'll be able to provide that transportation so people don't lose their jobs and other things or other health matters that come up that are unavoidable to keep those kids out. Because we know we go beyond 3 days and we're into 5. Those kids, absentees, could affect their ability to move forward, to graduate. So could you speak to how, a little more detail, when we get to the implementation of what the I need, my circumstances changed, and how do we have days established or how that would work?
So specific, to answer your question directly, no, I don't have a number that I can share with you today. We have a
That's okay.
process. We have a process that we've used for exceptional transportation or hardship cases that has been in place in this district from when I came, here downtown. So days of old, it was 100% paper based. Now it's become, electronic. So that will certainly speed that up. But it does require some due diligence because it may completely shock you. But sometimes the stories we get don't exactly mesh with the information that we find. So we do want to, just like with residency cases, just like with many other things, we are obligated to do our due diligence. And so we do extend things on our side. But if we reach out to a daycare provider, we reach out to an employer, we do something for due diligence. If they don't get back to us, that's, we can reach out again, but if they don't respond back, right, that could impede the timeline. So we don't have a hard and fast turnaround time like that. There's nothing that if you don't get it within 72 hours, it's just automatic thumbs up or thumbs down. That's not the way, it's just not the way it works. But like I said,
Okay.
we understand this matters a lot, right? It matters a lot to the family, but it also matters to us because we need to know whether it's going to be approved or not as well, because we have to make changes to the routing. We have to make sure that there's seats on the bus, et cetera. So we need the information as badly as that family needs that information. So we wouldn't purposely delay or in any way sort of slow walk the vetting and approval process. I think we all want that approval done, correctly, but we all equally benefit to a rapid answer, but we want it to be an accurate answer.
And just to make sure we're clear, we're talking about the same thing. I'm referring to after we get the program up and running, the individual request, and that's what you just answered to, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And
I
again,
just-
so, we get into really complicated ones, right? I'm in family court for something and there's battling back and forth. I mean, there's a lot of things we got to be really careful about. And sometimes we have to involve legal. Sometimes we have to get the PPW involved to, verify information or make observations. So these can go from very easy and quick turnarounds to they can get a little bit more complicated. And with a school district the size that we are, you're going to see that entire spectrum. And again, that's why I'd be very reluctant to pick just a magic number of days or hours. That's simply not really plausible for us.
Would it, though, be possible? I think some of that turnaround, I agree. Those were small districts or cities that had the rideshare programmatics alternatives. We don't have that in Anne Arundel County. We are transportation adverse, public transit adverse for the most part. But would it be fair that a family, if they do make the request for them to go from driving to now needing a bus, that we would acknowledge, like that there would be acknowledgement that the request was received and, hey, it's going to take a little while longer? Is that a typical expectation for the parents? Like, okay, I submitted it in, and normally it would be regular, but as you said, making sure we will capture and honor certain conditions that we have to, that they would be made aware that it may take some time. Is that anticipated to occur?
No, I think that's reasonable.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a, hey, please do, or anything like that.
And
but
quite
yeah.
often it's really us reaching out. Hey, we got your form. We need something else, or we have one more question, or whatever. So, in a lot of cases, they get a pretty rapid response because even on our first assessment, we'll reach back out to them if we need anything, additional from them. So they generally know that we've received it and we're beginning the processing of it.
Okay. And then I don't have any more questions for staff. I mean, I know our diligence and effort with it. I guess what I'm going to say is that regardless of the start times, this is something we probably needed to move to. And so the districts who did, just like you reported, that were able to make that flip switch a little faster than us, were able to see a more stable transportation department. And so regardless of the start time conversation, I feel they're two separate things. The Prismatic report was not a start time report, and this was a recommendation in the course of upgrading and updating and modernizing our transportation system. And I've seen it work very successfully. So for me, the support of this ultimately is it does not speak to the deficiencies or concerns expressed about start times. For me, this is something that is going to make us more efficient. And we've just got to recognize that the sustaining of our existing, make sure that there is a bus each and every day at each and every driveway is not going, the labor market and the economy is not supporting it. And the fact is we're growing and we can't build buses to meet our needs and our legal requirements of safety without approvals, budgets, and then outfitting that takes a good 6 to 9 months, can take up to 9 months. So I think this will give us a better opportunity to have a more stable transportation system. And I thank you very much, because we didn't have that flexibility. We're a 4-tier, 3/4 tier. We didn't have the ability just to flip the switch for us. So I do appreciate that. And again, as I said, normally an opt-out is always more equitable, but under the logistic and operational circumstances, and recognizing none of the special education folks are going to even be asked, and the walkers, because they are always required to be provided that transportation, number one, and you're correct, it would confuse. So what I'm seeing so far is great. And Dr. Tobin, I would just recommend maybe, I know we have announcements as it relates to the start times, but perhaps we should have, as our operations is winding down more into normal and end of year stuff, which is probably what I suspect the superintendent wants talked about this time of year, it's April, that we include some updates as we get closer to the launching of it and everything else moving forward. I do have just a clarification. I don't believe this is under regulatory operationals. I didn't see anything in the policy that requires action today.
Not that I'm aware
Okay.
of.
Yeah. No, nothing further. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ellis?
Thank you. I'm going to start with, so when this was first presented to us, Dr. Arlotto, I know there was a little bit of a furrowed brow and maybe skepticism about, why would anyone do this? Why would anyone opt out or not opt in when it was presented to us by Prismatic? I felt like you sounded uncertain, and several of us were uncertain about how this could be effective. But now the work has been done and the research has been done, and I appreciate the work. I thank you all for diving into that. So I just wondered if you could speak for just a moment, Dr. Arlotto, about what it's, because if I recall the motion, it was a request to bring a plan for the board to review, which is what we're doing. But it sounds to me like you are, Dr. Arlotto, in favor of moving forward with this. Can you just share a little bit about that?
So you just said it. I'm in favor of moving forward. Right. So that's the reason it's being brought forward to the board. If the board is not in favor of moving forward with this, then the board certainly can take action. But this is an operations decision that with my team and learning more about it and doing the research and ensuring that, as I talked, for example, with my senior staff earlier this week, we have the obligation to touch every family on this, right? Every family that is do transportation, we have an obligation to touch every family to make sure that we get a response. And then I think to Ms. Corkadell's point, it is something that will become part of the registration process in Anne Arundel County from a kindergartner to a 12th grader transferring in at any time or moving from one grade to the next. It will just become part of who we are and what we do. And so we believe that we can move forward and put this into motion. There's no question there'll be some scraped knees along the way as we learn this process. But we're committed to ensuring that every family is touched that has the ability to decide if they want transportation or not. And then I think it does pose some, while I don't know that we'll have significant numbers of families that will opt out of transportation when they know that they can opt in and take advantage of it should they so choose. Even if we looked at the numbers and we have something like 5 or 7% that do give us some of that specific information that can yield some efficiencies for us.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I jotted down a couple notes as I was hearing the presentation, and because I'm concerned about maximizing the use of this opt-in system, because I imagine many families will think, well, gee, there might be a situation where I can't get to the school on a certain day, and so I'm just going to have to opt in for the whole year. So I just jotted down a couple notes of things, opportunities I see to perhaps, and maybe we don't do it in the first year, but to improve the effectiveness of truly knowing how many kids are actually going to be on our buses. One is I'm a little certain, I understand it'll create a little bit more work between semesters, but why not do a semester opt-in? Because I think, between athletics and things like that, there could be changes. Another one is, what if every student who does not opt in perhaps gets a couple of emergency use vouchers? I know when I was a kid, if I was going to ride my friend Janine's bus home, mom would send in a note, and I'd ride her bus home. I know it doesn't operate that way now, but if parents could have that cushion, that they know that, okay, well, as long as I know I can, my child can ride the bus if there's an emergency, that would be great. And then finally, for our driving, mostly seniors, I think some juniors, could we stop charging them for parking spaces as they are giving up their seat on the bus? And that way, I don't know, just seems like something that could be an incentive for that student to not take that seat on a bus when they're not going to be using it anyway. Those are some ideas. And then thought I had one more question. Not really. I guess I'm just going to, Dr. Tobin, it's probably better interest of time. I just had a brief remark too, nothing prepared, but just simply that, look, I know when a new idea comes out, there's going to be skepticism. I think some of us had skepticism about this, as I just remarked a few minutes ago. But similar to what Ms. Schallheim said, we are tasked with making this school system the best it can be, and that includes making our transportation department as efficient as possible, as our families have been asking us for years. So I'm someone who has a lot of faith in people. I don't think it's too difficult to simply answer whether or not your child is going to use a bus. So I do share the concerns about reaching. Some families might be more difficult to reach, but I hear a real commitment to ensuring that we do reach everyone. That's the important piece of it. So as long as we do that well, I believe parents are perfectly capable of answering that question, and I appreciate anything we can do to make things more efficient. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ellis. I don't see any other lights. I had a question myself and a couple of comments. So we heard some testimony earlier uh, uh, indicating that at least when the hybrid opt-in was happening, when we were first opening our schools, there was not the ability from the school building to see the responses. And I'm just curious, because it seems to me, if I'm following what you were saying, Mr. Sheknovich, that one of the advantages here is the address confirmation and really knowing who's on a bus. And I know that at times that's difficult in the school building for schools to really know who's on what bus. So is this a system that could provide that to the folks in the school building?
So two answers. On the front side, part of our work plan is to provide with each successive round of notifications. And again, I indicated to you that we can use technology to sort of call out folks that have already responded so that we don't keep annoying them. But with each successive round, we have the capability of producing a report for every school of those remaining that have not yet responded. That's a small part of the plan of working with our schools, with our ambassadors and bilinguals, et cetera. So we've got to be able to produce that on the front side. On the back side, absolutely. So we will be able to produce reports by bus, not only for the administrator, but also for the bus driver. So, I mean, we're going to be getting a lot more accurate information down to the per bus level. That will be used in various areas of the school district. We think that is of tremendous value beyond even this project. That is going to be a valuable new informational asset for us here within the school district.
So that answers one of the things that I think Prismatic very much felt we needed to work on. And so it seems like this will kill a couple of proverbial birds to some extent.
Yes, ma'am, correct.
Okay, so that's good to know, because I know that's been an ongoing issue. With regard to really, this is my comment, and Ms. Corkadell, I see your light, so I'll come back to you once I'm done. I just want to say, I know there have been a lot of serious concerns. Ms. Corkadell has voiced them, others in the community have voiced them about the equity implications of this. And I do think it's worth noting, as I've thought about it. I mean, the equity implications for this are actually, if executed well, are very positive in my view, because the more we actually know who's using the transportation, we're in a better position to provide reliable transportation for those who are most dependent upon it, which tend to be our more underserved students who don't have access to private transportation. But the caveat is what folks have mentioned is the execution. And I think the equity concerns have more to do, as they've been voiced in emails and other responses we've received, are concerns around the execution. So I guess I would say the one other piece to think about here, and in some ways, I think this has been embedded in your comments, Mr. Sheknovich, but just to sort of surface them, is the accountability for us having touched every family, right? So presumably in producing these reports, in seeing that school by school, we really can account for every family has been reached out to. I mean, these are the kind of things that I think we will probably as a board need some updating on and some reports on as we move forward. So we're clear that all of that has occurred. And if there are stumbling blocks or difficulties in certain areas, we're aware of them, and we can make sure that all of that is managed so that by the time we're wrapping this up and we're ready to go, we really do have some understanding that not only have we made the attempt to touch every family, but that we have. because those really are the central concerns, I think, around equity for this. But overall, I thank you for the presentation. I think this is terrific. I'm grateful for the superintendent's recommendation on this. And I think that obviously a huge amount of work has been done. And I think this does do something that we absolutely have a duty as a board to do, which is to ensure that we use our resources in the best possible way. So Ms. Corkadell, you had another comment?
Thank you, Dr. Tobin. And it actually has to do with the answer you got to one of your questions that just sort of struck me. So having the disaggregated data by school could possibly, in theory, correct me if I'm wrong, then also allow us to maybe dig in a little deeper into the after-school transportation challenges that certain schools have, meaning that with that data, could we not then ascertain and target, since we will still be operating under limited resources and not enough for all, at least, you know, in the foreseeable next budget or two, with other obligations. But we would be able, however, to say this school is predominantly bus riders. Therefore, they may be better suited candidates to be prioritized for after-school programming as it relates. Is that something that we could also benefit from in data?
You know what I'll tell you in general is
Or not?
Well, no, so right now we don't even have the data, right?
Yeah. Well,
So
correct, yeah.
I mean, no, I'm leading into a good thing. I think once we have the data, I think we can use it for a lot of things that some of which we can contemplate today and others that we're probably going to learn going forward. But I think it'll just be wonderful to now have that data, and now we can be able to begin analyzing it and utilizing it, you know, for different purposes. So I can see that being another outgrowth of this effort, and there's probably many more, some of which can't even envision sitting here today, but I'm sure some smart person is going to figure it out within the next 12 months or so once we have the data.
Thank you very much. And thank you once again. I know the transportation has to change because how we conduct business in transportation has changed all across the nation, in the region, in the state, you know, and we're not alone. I mean, at one point, one of our neighboring counties even asked for the National Guard to consider helping. I mean, those are the levels and degrees of challenges, and they don't go away in a month or two, unfortunately. So I am looking forward to some new opportunities, but also to stabilize this for those who do need the transportation, and then work towards those longer solutions that cannot just be flipped with a switch. Thank you guys so very much. I know it's an ongoing effort, and it's greatly appreciated.
Okay, I see no more lights. Mr. Sheknovich, thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to move on to item 5.01, President's Report. Just briefly, I meant to mention our colleague, Ms. Frank, cannot be with us tonight. She's under the weather, and so we wish her well. I also want to, she's not here right now, but I wanted to congratulate Ms. Omasori on her town hall on the military child last night.
Can we
So for
surprise?
those of you,
Yeah. Can
yes.
we? I was going to say, let's wait until she gets back in the room and give her the
Well, but
standing ovation.
That's all I have to say. So if, for those of you who weren't able to attend, it's available online. Excellent information, wonderful contributions by our students, and wonderful leadership by Ms. Omasori. And so thank you, everyone. Okay, I believe Ms. Schalheim is stepping in tonight for Ms. Frank to give the report, item 5.02, the update on the superintendent search committee.
Yes, thank you. And I completely agree. I watched it last night. It was stunning. You should all watch it. It was a wonderful forum. I know that has nothing to do with item 5.2. I just want another plug for Ms. Omasori's work, and the panel of students blew my mind in a very good way. All right, here we go. So the work of the Superintendent Search Committee continues. To recap, in January, the committee issued an RFP, which is request for proposal, for a consulting firm and selected HYA, which stands for Hazard Young and Atia. On March 7th, a community survey was released to the public, and that closed on March 21st. During that time, HYA conducted interviews with 11 system-wide stakeholders, like CAC, our bargaining units, et cetera, and 20 community groups selected by the board. Using the results from all 31 interviews and the community survey, HYA created a desired characteristics and leadership profile report, which has now been posted to our AACPS website, as well as formally posted and advertised by HYA on March 24th. The application deadline is April 30th. The committee continues to work with the consultant and is committed to finding the most qualified applicant. Per state law, a superintendent or interim superintendent must be in place by July 1st. Again, state law. If the board is unable to find an exceptional candidate, an interim will be appointed, and we will continue to update the public and the board throughout the process. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Schalheim. Any questions? Nope, seeing none. There she is, Ms. Omasori. Congratulations on your town hall last night. Okay. Now, item 5.03, Ms. Ellis, the school start times report, public outreach.
Thank you, Dr. Tobin. Yes, just briefly, I'm going to kick this off by introducing this new video.
You may have heard that changes are coming to school schedules in August when Anne Arundel County Public Schools moves to healthier school start times that will greatly benefit our students. In the 2022-2023 school year, school hours will align with recommendations from a host of medical and other organizations that have talked about the positive impacts later start times have on the physical and mental health of adolescents. Our high schools will start at 8:30 a.m., middle schools will start at 9:15 a.m., and elementary schools will start between 8 and 9 a.m. These long discussed changes, formalized by a vote of the Board of Education in 2021, will allow students to be more well rested. Studies show that sleep deprivation negatively impacts most teens when it comes to school attendance, academic performance, athletic performance, and most concerning, mental health issues such as depression, anxiety, and engaging in high-risk behaviors. Studies also show that when schools shift to later start times, teens do get more sleep. This change also better aligns sleep habits for students at late starting elementary schools, many of whom wake hours before their school day even begins. At every level, it all adds up to one thing: students who are better prepared both physically and mentally, not just to succeed in the classroom, but to excel. While AACPS has been working for more than a year to prepare our school community for the new start and dismissal times, we recognize that this change presents some scheduling challenges for many families. There is still much work to be done between now and August when the new school year starts. Through open communication from AACPS to our entire school community to give families time for planning and schedule adjustments, we believe we can successfully make this important shift for all of our students, just as many school systems across the nation have accomplished for their students. We know you may have questions. We are prepared to provide the answers as we move forward on this path. For more information on the history and research leading to this change, as well as the latest developments, you can go to our special website, www.aacps.org/2223 school hours. Together, we can improve the physical and mental health of our students and set them up for a lifetime of success.
Bravo, Mr. Mosier.
So clearly there's a familiar voice there. And Mr. Mosier, would you mind joining me up here for a moment just to quickly introduce the website that your team, but first of all, huge kudos Mr. Mosier, to you and your amazing design and production team. That video was fantastic. Really sums it up in a nutshell. And as we introduce the website here, I just thought you could join me in that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. For the record, Bob Mosier, Chief Communications Officer. I will tell you that my contribution to the video is the voice. We gave our amazing design and print folks the script, and that is what they gave us, and we made no changes to it. There's no reason to make any changes to it. They did an amazing job. So, so I appreciate you recognizing that. Would you like me to talk about this site now, or are you?
That would be great. So Mr. Mosier and I sort of brainstormed a little bit about what kinds of things should be included on the website. It is going to be ever evolving and growing. But I just want to thank you again for those efforts. And here's what Mr. Mosier and his team came up with.
So this is very much, as Mrs. Ellis says, a work in progress. We will be adding to it. It is a living document of sorts, but it was important to put the research information, which you see there on the right. Each of those links goes to a study or a position paper. The video you see there in the center, under there is the CDC graphic that talks about the benefits of later school hours. And then we are building a frequently asked questions section, which will be categorized as you see there. That really is in its infancy. This will all move to, I'll call it a more modern site. Not that this isn't modern, but that will have a portal for public input, that results can be, answers can be given directly to those who pose those questions, and then we can categorize the topics of the questions into what we call tiles and put them on a website so that somebody can come back in 2 weeks, let's just say, and look for, I'd like to find out questions about childcare as an example, and click on a childcare tile, and all the questions that we have answered will be there. We will add more information to this as we go. Information about the information sessions that the board will conduct will be put on here. The videos of those sessions will be put on here so that folks can come back as we go through the process.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And as a reminder, as you shared with me, there will be a Spanish version of
the video. Yes,
of the video coming.
Yes.
That FAQ section will continue to grow. I've already written down a few questions that I know have been asked. So we'll continue communicating to build that. And the community, again, when the website switches over to the more, as you said, modern version of it, then the community will have even more opportunities. If you don't see your answer there, you'll be able to reach out, and we'll keep updating it.
So, and I do want to point out one thing about the website. Most of the text is in what we call native content and not links to PDFs, so that you can use that Google Translate button there, and you can translate any of that text into any of those languages.
Yes, that's great. And then, so yes, there's going to be forums coming, and so stay tuned for that. It'll be after spring break, obviously. And I think at this point, the biggest concern we're hearing, and understandably so, is families have concerns about childcare. I think for some families, it's going to get better because they won't need both before and after care. But for other families, it's going to, create some changes, logistically difficult situation for some families. So we are aware, we hear you, and the team is working on ways to connect families with resources. So stay tuned for that. We're going to be as helpful as we can. I think that about sums it up. Did I miss anything? Thank you again, and please thank your team for all of it.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mosier, and your entire team. I see Ms. Schalheim's light.
Yeah, I also just wanted to say thank you to Mr. Mosier and to the entire team. I also thought the video was fabulous. I showed it to my 5th grader. She understood it. She got it. She loved it. I thought it was, I just thought it was a really wonderful effort. Will you be the voice for the Spanish version?
Absolutely not.
Okay. And yeah, I just, I look forward to seeing this grow, and just thank you for and to Miss Ellis for being the sort of the liaison and helping this get off the ground. And I know this is a long time in coming. We initially said something about forums, a while ago, and but it's worth the wait to get all the information out properly. So yeah.
Yes, thank you. I should have mentioned that I asked Ms. Ellis to be the board liaison on this, and she kindly agreed, which has been a fair amount of work. But yes, information will continue to be forthcoming. We will have the forums, and we will have some great ways for people to send in their questions, get responses, see the questions that other people have posed, see those responses. Like some of the other things we've just discussed with regard to the opportunities that the data we're going to have on buses are going to present, I think we're also finding some software potential with regard to interactive Q&A that will be useful for this process, but will also be useful in the long run for a lot of our outreach. So this is proving to be a valuable project on many fronts. So thank you to everyone for the work, and we will continue to update the public as more information is available. And so now we will move to item 5.04, Policy Committee Report. Ms. Dent.
Good afternoon, Madam President, Mr. Vice President. Good evening. My name is Gloria Dent, and I really want to talk to you a little bit more about policy. Normally, I don't have I'm not long-winded, but policy has become a very touching subject, especially with all the things that we're making modifications to as it pertains to the school. I would encourage the public to please utilize the time when policies are put out on the portal to make your public comments. That's where we can make change. That's where we can affect change. What I see most often is the comments that are in the public comments or things that are made that about areas that do affect policy, but there's no policy in place. So I just want to plead to the public for please take time out when the policy is open and make sure that you make your comments so that your voices can be heard, but more so that we can put it in writing, and then you will have a voice at the table. It is a little bit difficult to make a motion for everything that affects the school, but it's a lot easier if we would take time out to put it in policy, and then we do have a definitive way to make sure that we can not only represent the public properly, but also hear your voice. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so we have item 5.05, PTA report. I'm not sure. Do we have a PTA rep here this evening? I don't believe we do. Okay. All right then. Okay, item 5.06, Superintendent's Report, School Operations. Dr. Arlotto.
Thank you very much, Madam President, members of the board. As always, I'm glad to bring you some information on happenings from around the county. The operations portion is I'm going to be setting aside tonight and into the future. It's really going to be from this point forward information about what's happening in the school system. So our new Director of Transportation, Mrs. Terry Whitehead, officially came on board AACPS at the end of last week. Mrs. Whitehead is coming to us from the Maryland Department of Transportation. We're excited to have her leading our transportation division and welcome her to Team AACPS. The federal government has extended the CDL under the hood testing waiver through June 30. It was initially set to expire on March 31. We have not officially heard from the state Department of Transportation and Motor Vehicle Administration if Maryland will adopt this modification and thus extend the waiver as well, but we suspect that that is likely. We'll be hosting our next hiring event on Tuesday, May 3rd, from 4:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. at Old Mill High School. The recruitment of bus drivers and aides will be one of the focus areas, and all the private bus contractors have been invited to participate, and have recruitment tables set up at the event. The event is being held in conjunction with the Anne Arundel Workforce Development Corporation and will also have representation from, of course, AACPS, Recreation and Parks, County Department of Health, and the County Department of Public Works. With a very low number of COVID cases among our students and the low case rate across Anne Arundel County, beginning with our return to classes after spring break, we will no longer provide direct, synchronous instruction to those students who have tested positive for COVID and are isolating. Those students will be able to log on to their Brightspace accounts and access their classwork, homework, and their teacher. 3 students in our AVID program have won prestigious Dell scholarships. They are Shafa Alam from North County High School, Bianca Guffey from Southern High School, and Ana Hernandez Balcarcel from Broadneck High School. The Dell Scholars Program, absolutely. The Dell Scholars Program started in 2004, places greater emphasis on a student's determination to succeed than just academic record and test scores. The purpose of the scholarship program is to empower students to gain the knowledge, skill sets, and attitude needed to cope with their changing world and the circumstances in which they live. The scholarships come with a $20,000 reward to be used over the course of the next 6 years, as well as a laptop and printer. As you may be aware, we have been working with our high schools and the Anne Arundel County Board of Elections to increase awareness of voter registration process for high school students. We just completed the first round of work in our schools, and the results were excellent. 254 students registered to vote, and another 145 took information home to complete. That certainly is a great start to this program. MSDE recently released the 4-year graduation rates. We've had a chance to review the data, and there is some good news to share. For the first time in AACPS, our overall graduation rate for all students passed the 90% mark. We also had 6 student groups post their highest graduation rate ever this year. In addition, all student groups have improved their graduation rate since the start of the state cohort model in 2011. With respect to schools, we had 3 high schools, Arundel, Glen Burnie, and Northeast, post their highest graduation rate ever, and Old Mill High School had its highest graduation rate in 6 years. As a result, we now have 9 out of our 13 high schools with graduation rates above 90%. 8 high schools improved their graduation rate this year, and 12 high schools have improved their graduation rate since the start of the state cohort model in 2011. As you all are well aware, and as you attend events, this is an exciting time of year for AACPS students to showcase their academic prowess. Recently, we've seen students soar at our Science and Engineering Expo, History Day competition, dance showcases, spring musicals, art exhibits, creative writing competitions, VEX, FIRST, and Sea Perch robotics tournaments, essay contests, the spelling bee, Mesa engineering challenges, 24 game matches, internships, and many, many more. Our students share their amazing talents, knowledge, ingenuity, and skills within our county, throughout Maryland, across the nation, and internationally as well. Most certainly, it is also exciting to see our seniors begin to receive their college acceptances, begin to earn their workforce certifications, receive scholarship offers, and make their decisions to serve in one of the branches of the U.S. military. Our students make us proud. They really are career and college ready. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Ms. Ellis?
Just enjoyed a very uplifting report, and thank you, Dr. Arlotto. And I want to also celebrate the very busy play and musical season that our county has experienced. Well done to all of our schools. It's just exciting to see live theater again. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Corkadell?
Thank you, Dr. Tobin. I just want to reiterate a warm arms open wide to Mrs. Whitehead for joining our team. Transportation is and remains, something that we have invested a lot of time and resources in and will continue to do so. And so having fresh eyes, especially with her experience, I know is going to carry us very far as we continue to instruct positive change and modernization of our transportation system. So welcome aboard, Mrs. Whitehead.
Thank you. Ms. Omasori?
Oh, so yeah, I haven't spoken this meeting, which is rare, but I will say I was also very, very happy to hear today's superintendent's report, just because as a senior and knowing many of the students that you listed out and being one of those students that you listed out in those many categories, it feels really nice that my last year in AACPS gets to be one where we don't have to wear masks, where it looks very similar to my 9th grade year and where it feels very normal. Quick shout out to Shrek the Musical at Arundel, just because I remember buying the Shrek ears at F Hall. And it was really nice because last year I couldn't even imagine being in F Hall. So to actually participate in what I feel like high school should always be was just really, really, really nice, considering that my Spanish teacher has a countdown of how many days we have left, and it is closing in on less than 30. And it's really hard to believe, but I'm so glad that through the work that Dr. Arlotto and his office have done to make sure we have been able to come back and be better than how we once left. I want Dr. Arlotto to know it does not go unnoticed. And I speak for all the seniors out there who are, one, happy we get to have a prom. I still have to buy my own prom dress. And two, are happy we get to have a graduation and are very thankful for the senior year we've had so far. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I think we are all incredibly excited to hear a report that's a report, not a lot of the other things that so much of time has had to be taken with. Mr. Silkworth.
Just a very brief comment, and I want to thank Dr. Arlotto for that extremely positive report. I've had the opportunity to go to so many award events and over the past few weeks, and there's no doubt that in spite of all its challenges that our students have encountered throughout their career, they continue to do unbelievably great things in our classrooms. And I just want to make sure that everyone out there in the public understands that great things are happening in our schools every single day, in the classrooms, on the athletic fields, in the auditoriums, everywhere. And I also would be remiss if I did not say all of the great things that are happening that our students are doing would not be possible if it were not for the great staff that we have, the great teachers that we have. And so I just wanted to shout out to them as well. We are as proud of our teachers as we have ever been, and we certainly are very proud of our students. Boomy, we are proud of you, my dear.
Yes, and I will simply add also, just as a recovering political scientist, I'm just really glad to see all those students registering to vote as well, because we want to hear from them. They're our future. So thank you. Okay, so seeing no more lights, we will move on to item 6, consent items.
Can I request to bundle those?
Any objections? Is there a second? Consensus to bundle? Okay. Ms. Howell? Yes, consensus. Yeah.
So we don't need to vote.
So we're good. Okay.
Yeah.
So, oh,
Recommendation.
sorry, we need a recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I recommend that the Board of Education authorize the award of contracts as listed on today's agenda, 6.01 through 6.06.
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
Miss Ellis,
Aye.
Miss Corkadow,
Aye.
Miss Schallheim,
Aye.
Miss Dent,
Aye.
Miss Omasore,
Aye.
Mr. Silkworth,
Aye.
Dr. Tobin.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to section 7, item 7.01, administrative personnel appointments. Dr. Alado?
Thank you, Madam President. I recommend that the personnel listed on the attached sheets be promoted and or appointed.
I second.
No, you have to move.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I heard that. I move that we accept the administrative personnel appointments as recommended by the superintendent.
Second.
Miss Ellis,
Aye.
Miss Corkadow,
Aye.
Miss Schallheim,
Aye.
Miss Dent,
Aye.
Miss Omasore,
Aye.
Mr. Silkworth,
Aye.
Dr. Tobin.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. Item 7.02, personnel. Dr. Alado?
Thank you, Madam President. I recommend the board approve the actions as stipulated on the attached sheets.
So moved.
Second.
Miss Ellis,
Aye.
Miss Corkadow,
Aye.
Miss Schallheim,
Aye.
Miss Dent,
Aye.
Miss Omasore,
Aye.
Mr. Silkworth,
Aye.
Dr. Tobin.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to policy revisions on second reading. Item 7.03, public comment at board meetings. Good evening, Ms. Ortiz.
Good evening. For the record, Jeanette Ortiz, Legislative and Policy Counsel. Before you is Policy BCB, a public comment at board meetings. This is on second reading. This policy was on a 30-day public comment period. I did get a couple of questions from a member of the public, which I responded to, and that's included in your meeting materials. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Mr. Silkworth, I see your light. Okay, that's an old light. Okay, I see no lights. Okay. And moving on to,
Oh,
oh,
wait.
sorry. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm
I
losing
thought-
my mind. I was on a different wavelength. Yeah,
Yeah.
I actually have a motion.
Okay.
Apologies. Still foggy from the illness. Okay.
Go ahead.
So, I, as one does, circulated this in advance. So I would like to move that we edit item C6, sorry, on the policy to read as follows. And everyone should have this, but I'm just going to read it for the record. That speakers are expected to keep their comments focused on the topics of the agenda item for which they signed up to speak. Comments shall remain civil and appropriate and may not include personal attacks on individuals, obscene or profane language, or threats of violence, intimidation, or harassment. An individual who does not adhere to these expectations shall forfeit any remaining speaking time. The board president, as presiding officer at meetings, may direct an individual whose public comments do not adhere to these expectations to leave the meeting. Speakers are expected to comply with any such direction from the board president. So that's my motion. So I'm looking for
Okay,
a second.
thank you.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Ms. Ellis, I see your light is on.
Yes, thank you. It's not about anything in particular in the motion that I think is wrong or inappropriate for our board meetings at this time, but I just feel it's more than needs to be in policy. We already operate that way. I think policy is supposed to be rather, I think, more general, and we do have a script that the president reads that can be revised and updated. We heard from someone tonight who has concerns that we only have comment on agenda items, and while that's been a decision of this board, and I back that. I don't want to tie the hands of the board by having to change policy. I just think it's more than is needed in the policy. I like the policy that's before us, and it allows us to still do those things. So I'm not going to support the motion, but just want to explain why.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Corkadell.
Thank you. For the same reason, I'll be proposing an amendment in the upcoming item 7.04. I do concur with Ms. Ellis, and look, a lot of governing bodies have a lot of rules, but there is a difference between our rules that we post here and we publish and actual policy. We had to change how we did our public comment, and if I had not had that fluidity of that language, our ability to correct course when things went awry, and recall public, remember till midnight, et cetera, especially when COVID hit, had I had that, our policy on policy would not have been flexible enough for me to move forward without an actual systemic policy change. And I always respect our willingness and wantonness. We have handbooks that guide us, and a presiding officer that can well ensure our safeties, because sometimes we may need more than that. And I know we have expressed more than what is in there from time to time when we are facing more aggressive agenda items or a lot of confrontation expected. So I appreciate where we're going with it, and I would support it in a regulatory handbook environment, and am committed to the board always reviewing those things and affirming them like we did when we needed to make those changes. We made them as a decision of the board, and we've made probably 2 or 3 corrective, adjustments as we have needed to, staging up and staging down just in the last several months. So I greatly appreciate that, and am very committed to every single word that was stated in the proposed amendment, but do share the concern of the details in our policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Schulheim.
I don't see, I thank you both for your comments on this. I don't see a situation where we would ever we'd ever be okay with personal attacks, obscene or profane language, threats of violence, etc., or deviating from what people signed up to speak on. So that's why I put this forward. It aligns with what we read every time. Our handbook is 3.5 years plus out of date. Still talks about the 2018 election. So it doesn't really, I'm just throwing it out there. It might be a while. So that's why I put this forward, because this is what a reasonable person would want and expect out of public comment if you're sitting on this side of the dais, at least. So that's why I brought this forth. Thank you.
Ms. Dent.
Yes, so I just want to ask Ms. Schulheim one question. The crux of what you're saying in your motion is really hinges on that the comments remain civil and appropriate, and Charlie 6 or 6 position on the C6. The comments, the one sentence before and after is, as I look at it, is what's read by the president at each one of the meetings. So, and this is really a comment to you, is that are you open to modifying the motion that it speaks to the civility of C6? Because I think that's where you're really hinging on what's causing. Because as it stands right now, it says that public members will remain civil. And so that can mean a lot to a lot of people. But you kind of spelled out what that means to you and how and kind of defined it. And Madam President, I'm not against, unless there's some large reason on why we can't do it, on why we can't spell out what does it mean to be civil. I have been here for a little over 9 months now, and I've seen everything from having to have the police here to having to have protection to individuals fearing for their lives from intimidation by the public comments on what's going to happen. So I do think there's some definition to what civil means, may need to be out there to the public. And I don't think the time to read it is when they get here and possibly listen to your comment. So I would ask, before we vote on the motion tonight, to allow me and Ms. Ortiz and the attorney to get together and bring back to you a language that will make sense, but at the same time, reach the greater need of what we're trying to do here in this policy.
I second the hold.
I want to respond. This has been through two lawyers, and they're both in this room tonight. This has been through Ms. Ortiz and Mr. Burns. So this has been well thought through by two of our counsel who we rely on regularly.
It has, but my comment isn't for the full motion. My comment is that when you're writing a policy, I think the comments, the sentences, 3 sentences, I think the sentence 1 and 3 is pretty stated. It's pretty obvious. I think that the comment 2 is the bulk of what we're trying to get to. And so I'm simply asking to amend the motion that we work on sentence 2, as opposed to keep the whole motion in place.
I mean, this is second reader, so, whatever the will of the board is, we could talk about it in the next couple of weeks. And then, if we just have to adhere to our policy on policy making, and if there was substantive, that's the word I'm looking for, changes on third reader, it would just go back up for public comment.
Yeah.
I want to get it right. I don't necessarily want to do it fast. I'm fine with that.
Okay.
If that's the will of the board. I want us to walk the talk in every sense. And if what we're reading is good enough to read at every meeting, that should be good enough to go into this. And that's my view. So whatever it takes to get there, and I'm cool with that.
Okay, I see another couple of lights. Let me just suggest, sort of reframe what I'm hearing, which is possibly maybe vote on this amendment tonight, see how it goes. And then what I'm hearing you suggest, Ms. Schalheim, is if the amendment were not to succeed, somebody could bring another amendment on third reader, right? Okay, hang on a second.
Point of clarification. I thought the way Ms. Dent had framed it was a proposal to hold the amendment, and I seconded it. So if that is the case, that would need to be disposed of before any vote on Ms. Schalheim's prime amendment.
Was that what you were suggesting, Ms. Dent, that we hold it?
But I'm not sure because
It wasn't
the
framed as a
second was
Yeah.
accepted
That's
by
what
the
I'm trying-
presiding officer.
That's what I'm trying to
It
understand.
wasn't
Yeah.
framed as a motion, but yeah, that's what I heard, was that
Okay.
we would hold it.
Okay. So we have
Right,
we
yeah.
have a motion, we have a second.
Mhm.
Let's vote on that, which
Yeah.
is to hold this.
Yeah,
Okay.
because I'll just say what is making sense would probably compel me to be supportive if we could, just tighten out some of those things that I had already expressed. So, okay, thank you for the clarification.
Okay, this is a vote to hold the amendment, the vote on the amendment. Ms. Ellis,
Aye.
Ms. Corkadell,
Aye.
Ms. Schalheim,
Aye.
Ms. Dent,
Aye.
Ms. Omasori,
Aye.
Mr. Silkworth,
Aye.
Dr. Tobin.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Schulheim.
With the understanding that this is coming back.
Mhm.
This is coming back, and in the interim, we're gonna talk amongst our council. And post.
Okay. All right, so we can move on to the next item, if I'm correct. So that takes us to item 7.04, Board Evaluation, Code BI.
So yes, policy BI, board evaluation, is also before you on second reading. This too was on a 30-day public comment period. I did not receive any public comments. Don't know if I mentioned this in the previous policy, but this was also a board member requested policy revision. And so specifically, the revisions were to align with recommendations from the Gibson performance audit to the board on self-evaluation and also NSBA best practices. I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Ms. Corkadell.
I'll defer questions, and after that, I do have a motion, and the language should be before the members when the time is right.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Schulheim.
Yeah, I have a question about, 'cause I don't sit on policy committee. So the language was suggested by a board member, and then this was all vetted through council and the policy committee. Sometimes we spend multiple meetings on things, sometimes we don't. Can you just walk me through like how this came to be before us today?
Yes, so this was a request from Ms. Corkadell along with a policy BCB public comment. And the specific request, which I believe I shared on first reading and I shared just now and with the policy committee, was to update this policy to encompass recommendations by the Gibson performance audit, as well as NSBA best practices. There was some commentary in the performance audit, which specifically called out this policy that it had not been followed in at least a couple of years. And so based on that guidance, I made revisions. And so it was brought to the policy committee 2 times. It was a little bit more prescriptive the way it was originally drafted in accordance with the guidance that I received from the performance audit and NSBA best practices. So the policy committee asked me to go back and make it a little bit less prescriptive. And so I did that. And so after a second meeting reviewing the policy, it was voted out of policy committee to come before the full board.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other lights. Ms. Corkadell.
Thank you. There's several components of this amendment. I'm going to read it into public record, but I would strongly encourage members to pull up the draft, and you will see that I have already annotated in red those proposed changes to the specific section, and that it is in all caps is additions being recommended, and that which has been struck out are items that I am proposing moving. And so I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to explain the 3 sections and why, and then open it up to comments, provided it has a second. I want to make a comment that Ms. Frank and I had worked on this, and it is unfortunate that she is unable to join us, but this is a culmination of her and I's effort, as well as feedback, of course, from staff and legal as appropriate. And so the first proposed change is, as part of the amendment, is the title. The board conducts other types of evaluations. And I thought that it would be more evident and clear as to what we're referring to here. We evaluate the superintendent. We have other evaluations that we conduct. And so self-evaluation is what we are doing in this, in every aspect of it. So I am proposing adding that as part. In section C2 is a little bit of language cleanup to better support the more substantive revisions made in sections 3 and 4, as well as to clarify and sort of clean up that idea of annual retreat a little more. And thank you for some of the suggestions brought forth. And so section C2 should now read, I'm proposing would now read, in conjunction with its annual retreat, the board shall conduct a self-evaluation annually at a time designated by the board president and discuss strategies to improve its effectiveness and monitor its progress. Under section C3, I am proposing it shall read, the specific form of the self-evaluation instrument, including criteria, subjects of evaluation, and process shall be reviewed annually and determined by the full board prior to its annual retreat. And in section 4, the evaluation content and method shall reflect the board's agreed upon goals, priorities, and governance responsibilities, and continuous commitment to educational equity. And further to strike in the details of A, B, and C, and some other language thereafter.
That's your motion, right?
Mhm.
Second.
Okay. Just real quick, as I said, the title, of course, was just sort of something I thought would better be reflective. The language in 2, 3, and 4 is really a combination to just better reflect. Number one is to make it our ownership. I understand, a big part of wanting to put some of the details in is making sure that we're accountable. But the first part of the accountability has to be with us actually doing it and follow through with it. So making that a little bolder was the first part. And then second to that was to replace some of the specifics so that we can actually year to year identify based on our annual priorities that we're supposed to have, not just the budget ones, and based on our responsibilities so that we can agilely and well improve ourselves. And I'll just say that, none of what was worded is wrong, and none of what was worded is anything that I am opposed to committing to. But I also know that this board has not actually, as a group, identified how we want to evaluate ourselves yet. With our new board and our transition, we have not identified our priorities. I'm referring to the annuals, not our strategic goals, of course. That goes without saying. And then lastly, identify what those top 4 or 5 things are. And we know from doing other evaluations of the superintendent and of our staff that changes from year to year. It absolutely changes from year to year. We've had a couple carryovers, and to put it in policy, I think does not align with how we tend to want to do that. Of course, in board policies, we do get a little more specific, but I think the handbook could identify any processes or anything further that the board may want to. But to be clear, once the board makes those decisions, they're just as rock solid as they are anything else. When this board makes a decision, it doesn't need it to be written in policy. That decision must be carried through until time that the board has otherwise discharged. So that was the intent. Ms. Frank came in. Both of us made comments similarly, maybe for different reasons, from different experiences. And so her draft amendment language was very, very similar to mine. So we combined the efforts. And I'll just lastly point out that, since Gibson has recommended and NSBA's best practices have, not that they are aged in their advice, but that occurred, some of those incursions are prior to our adoption of our equity policy. And so in accordance with that, that language was not found previously, but I do believe would be in the spirit and intent of this board's position and continuing commitment, not just to our policy, but to ourselves and our community. So that was the other little addition there. And unless there's any further questions or anything, I will take this as my commentary, unless there's something, that I feel I need to
Comes
clarify.
up. Okay. Ms. Ellis?
Thank you. I do sit on the policy committee. I did sit in on those discussions and was happy to move this policy forward to the board. But this is why we do this. As Ms. Ortiz did mention, the policy in its in its original form that we first discussed did evolve because there were concerns about how prescriptive it is. And while I shared some of those concerns, I do feel like this proposed language in the amendment kind of further captures what I really feel like we were trying to get at. Because when we have this list A, B, and C of what it is we're going to be evaluating, we could be missing things and perhaps a year when we're unlikely to have new members, then onboarding of new members doesn't need, of course, we always have a new student member, but it doesn't mean we need to revisit that every year. It's just, we could have other priorities that are very important. So I think this language doesn't negate anything that was in the policy that was brought to the board, but it further enhances what the policy is trying to do.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Almasori?
So I was I was waiting for this meeting to hear Ms. Corkadell's comments on the omissions for the policy C4. And I guess a little bit of where my confusion kind of comes from is when we talk about how it might come off as prescriptive to keep the subpoints A, B, and C, that portion that says shall at a minimum, that doesn't force us to stay onto these subpoints. That just says these are things to talk about at least when we do our evaluations. And so when you spoke about kind of feeling constricted, or at least that's how I kind of perceived it, that confused me because this isn't at a max, this is at a minimum. This is something that you just cover, and going on forward, other things that you think are under the umbrella of educational equity that we as a board need to be looking at when we self-evaluate. And so coming into this meeting, I was kind of 50-50 on my support. I'm still waiting to hear other comments that may come tonight, because I feel as though to omit this, I'm not sure that I see the purpose, and I'm not sure that I agree that this is going in the direction of what Gibson wants us to do when we self-evaluate. Because if that section at a minimum wasn't there, then I would understand what you meant. But because it is there, that kind of covers, in my eyes, the concern that was brought up tonight.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Schalheim?
So I want to first thank Ms. Frank, who isn't here, and Ms. Corkadell, who is, for taking the time to try to walk me through this offline. That was kind, and because I was confused. And I don't come at this, there's no malice or agenda or anything like that. I just think there's just a difference in philosophy of where we sit on this. For me, and this is my own opinion, think that we should have this list. Think that it's important for accountability, for transparency, gives a little bit of a skeleton on which to build from. To me, that's just my philosophy on this. And it's likely to differ from some members up here, and that's fine. That's why we have these conversations, and that's why we have these discussions. So I'm not as, I'm just not supportive of it because of that, because we just see things just differently, and neither one is wrong. It's just, we just have a difference of opinion. So that's why I would rather put shall at a minimum and give some meat, as opposed to being so unspecific that if a member of the public were looking for this online, or the next iteration of the board, year 2024, when we might have a completely new board and no institutional knowledge at all, like what it is that we meant at this moment, or so that's why I'm not going to be supportive of it. But again, it's just a difference of opinion, and I'm really grateful for the time of my colleagues in helping me understand their point of view. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Ellis, you have a light on. Is that an old light?
No, actually, I noticed it was on. I was going to turn it off, but I do have something.
Okay.
I just, a couple things, want to remind my colleagues that there's only so much time in a day. And if we have other priorities, but we shall at a minimum cover these things, we could have missed opportunities. I think if it said something like such as instead of shall at a minimum, it could give recommendations for a board that might not know what they're supposed to be looking at. I'd be comfortable with that, but I'm not comfortable with the prescriptive language without some type of change like that.
Thank you. Ms. Corkadell, you get the final comments. I just wanted to say something quick before I hand it over to you. Yes, I figured I saw your light. So I just want to say, while I think all the opinions that have been expressed have merit here. Again, to the point made earlier, I think it's very important to recognize what policy is for and what should be in policy. And I too I'm on the policy committee. We did discuss it. The policy that came before the board and before the public was obviously what came out of that discussion. And certainly what we provided was less prescriptive than initially had been brought. But as I've thought about this, I do think there's value in this change. And I have to say, my own feeling is based on the following. This is a particular kind of policy in that it is explicitly about and for the board. And as such, I'm always very concerned that we retain as a board the understanding that we govern ourselves. There's no magic something that's going to appear out of the clouds to tell us what to do. There are laws, there are rules, there are all of those things. But in governing, we are the governing body. And so I believe that embedded in this language, particularly in section 4, the evaluation content and method shall reflect the board's agreed upon goals, priorities, and governance responsibilities, and continuous commitment to educational equity, points back where it should, which is that we as a board have done that. And I am concerned that having these iterations of very particular things moves us, for lack of a better analogy, from leadership to management, right? We're checking boxes to some extent when we do this. That's not what in my view, that's not what governing bodies are meant to do. We have to live up to the principle of this policy. That's our job. We are not supposed to just check things. And I'm not saying that is what we will do, but I'm saying that the way a policy like this is written is important. It's a reminder of what governing, frankly, means. We have to figure it out. So for that reason, having thought about it a long time, I am in support of this amendment. I think it gets us to where we need to be in our own governance, which is essentially what this policy is about. So, so those are my comments. Ms. Corkadell.
If there's no further comments of colleagues, I'll just make a couple closing remarks and hopefully maybe address a concern or two that was raised along the way. And I am a big fan of self-governance, of self-evaluation. I do it myself as an independent business person, and have actually been looking forward to, since I've come on board, to the time where we have all transitioned in and can decide as a group what we want to evaluate ourselves on. And I'll just remind everyone, we have, I mean, we're an education industry, and so I think we have a pretty good standard and good examples already out there. And one thing that I learned, for as much as I have experience in evaluation, is just in the superintendent's evaluations, for example, we or an employee, that's usually a total of 3 to 5 categories. There were ones that there was quite a few already listed, and the evaluations are really to home in on those larger categories so that we actually can measure it. So I would just ask that we consider that as a course as to what its intent is. And I will just also keep the door open that I am very supportive is after our retreats and we continue to progress in establishing our priorities and all these other things. As we continue to move towards that and updating our policies, that once we set the criteria and those categories, that nothing precludes us from a couple years down the road ensuring that this policy is still meeting our needs. This is not a one-shot out, particularly ones concerning us. Does policy take some time to adjust and implement? Absolutely. But perhaps after we have met some of our other core goals administratively and as a board to improve ourselves, we could revisit this and modify this language to better reflect. Lastly, I'll just point out that Gibson, I was the liaison person for the board. I was also the person that asked for this along with several other policy revisions with no specified language, but with the direction. And that was on behalf of the board as your former leader. Those were identified. I will point out and further, and I know Dr. Tobin knows that, she was the chair at the time when we had those discussions. But overall, Gibson's goal was to give us that guidance. And just like we received some guidance recently from emergency management, we also recognize that not all the recommendations that they made to us were appropriate for policy, that some of it may be better serving in other capacities or is just not appropriate on our structure. So I think we're doing our normal due course, and I would just ask for your consideration and thank you for your support, regardless of how this lands. I know we're already in a better position. And I guess we're ready to vote, Dr. Tobin.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Howell.
Miss Ellis,
Aye.
Miss Corkadell,
Aye.
Miss Schalheim,
Nay?
Miss Dent,
Aye.
Miss Omasore,
Aye.
Mr. Silkworth,
Aye.
Dr. Tobin.
Aye.
6-1 motion passes.
Okay, thank you. So that concludes our policy.
And just as a reminder, so since this is a very substantive amendment
Yes.
to the policy, I will be posting it online for another public comment period until your next board meeting, which is in accordance with the policy setting policy, and we will push out all of that information via social media, et cetera, as the communications office always does. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ortiz. Okay, so moving on to item 7.05, Center of Applied Technology North, educational specifications. Dr. Arlano.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I recommend approval of the Center of Applied Technology North replacement school educational specification, including space for both existing and proposed new programs.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Schalheim. No, these are just questions. We received the materials. Yes, yes.
And I read all, wait,
Yeah.
my mic was not on. And I read all the materials, as I always do. I continue, as always, to be a gigantic fan of our CAT programs, North and South, and remain in awe of the wonderful opportunities we give our students, things I couldn't have dreamt of if I tried in the early 90s going through high school, because they did not exist. And the importance we are giving to our students to pursue careers that make them happy so that they can have the path of their choosing afterwards. So I just wanted to start out with that. I am thrilled that we're providing a new building, and I'm thrilled that we're having this conversation. I, of course, want to serve every single student. I know that that's not possible. So I just wanted to know what if you could just briefly outline what the process was to determine the instructional space that we're allotting for this building, and sort of the why behind that, so that myself as a super Uber fan can understand, and the colleagues and folks out there. So it was a very long-winded question. I apologize.
Well, I'll start. I'm Lisa Seaman Crawford, Director of Facilities, and I do want the rest of my team to be able to introduce themselves.
Mary Katz, Lead Architect in Planning, Design, and Construction.
Kyle Roof, Supervisor, Planning, Design, and Construction.
Ryan Sackett, Coordinator of Career Technical Education.
Well, I know that our team here has gone out to many career technology centers throughout the state and evaluated what we are doing here and what is being done other places. And with that, I think they, came up with the programs, the space allotment, based on what they had seen.
Okay. So, for example, like cosmetology, right? Super popular course, and really just such an opportunity for our students to avail themselves of something that they can get certified for at a much lower cost during high school than they would, say, if they pursued that career after graduation. And I know, for example, that we have, more than 100, and this is not hyperbole, more than 100 people on a wait list every year for a course like that. And so how did we ensure that we're just maximizing every square inch of that building we can to serve as many students as possible for programs like that?
Ryan, would you like to tackle that?
Sure. So we currently have two cosmetology cohorts that exist at the Center of Applied Technology North and one at CAT South. And the plan is moving forward is to, in my understanding of the design space, is to maximize the amount of students that we can have in those spaces in the new building as well. And also work on making sure that we retain every single student that participates in the program so we can have the most number of students finish. So I don't know if I exactly answered your question, but we are working always to make sure that whatever facilities we put in place are both industry standard and allow our students to safely and properly execute whatever skill they're trying to do in their classroom. So I think that the design specs that they have created have met what at least our current program is, if not bigger.
And I would add that there's a limiting factor in having so many programs under that roof, right? So we could accommodate all 200 people that want to be part of, I'm making that up, cosmetology, but to accommodate them means space where we may be giving up space for one of the other programs, right? We also have to look at staffing.
Right.
And what is the availability? It's not the it's a very unique individual that can come in and work with our students in these professional capacities, in these career technical programs. Mr. Rose, the principal of Cat North, is here, and I think he would attest to that it is difficult to hire in any of our programs across all of our schools in almost every discipline, and it's 2 or 3 times that much more difficult in the Cat Center. So it's no one factor that limits or allows us to build. There are many factors that we looked at, that this team looked at, and as you well know, the basic concept of this has been out there, and this team has been working on it for years. And so it has given us time to go out, as Ms. Seaman Crawford mentioned, and go out and look at existing centers. The new center down in Somerset County, and they just built a brand new center they went out and looked at. The Thomas Edison Center in Montgomery County, as well as a number of others, Frederick and others, to get some ideas not only about the programming, but about the space, the materials to build the building. And I think this team will certainly come up with a unique design, but I just want to make it really clear that there are a number of factors that have to go into, whether it's staffing, safety is another one. You can only have safely a certain number of students in a welding program to make sure that teacher can keep those students safe. You just can't keep adding welding bays. You have to have, I think it's 12 or 15, and there is a limit to it, whatever that is. And so there are a number of factors, which I'm glad the team certainly can talk more about, and Mr. Rose, if necessary. But I think it's important for you and the public to understand there are many factors that this team has been reviewing over the years, as well as looking at what are the new programs that we want to offer, what's up and coming, what's the state supporting, where is that growth? Just like we added barbering this year at Cat North, that is a new program, and we're able to add that to the space that exists now at Cat North.
I very, very much appreciate that. And don't get me wrong, I'm going to vote yes in case that was any sort of concern. All my questions and my concern are just out of love for our CAT programs. And I know the cost per square foot is north of $400, and I know that we're constrained by the state. I'll just close with this one little just idea, just to gnaw on for future. So if we're knowing our constraints, and if we're confined, and this is the max we can, and I know that the max we're doing is, as far as I understand, is also the largest building of its type in the state. Is that an accurate statement? That's what I've been told. That another way maybe we can reach more kids, and this is of course a staffing issue and a funding issue, but we currently have two cohorts, a morning and an afternoon. Maybe down the line, maybe there's a twilight one, maybe there's an evening sort of program, and for their Cat North and South, just an idea, just to throw it into the universe. Of course I'm going to support this, and it just sounds magical. I can't wait to tour it someday, and I can't wait to vote on the next iteration of this project. And I'm grateful for all of your work. I just ask these questions because my only wish is that we could just, touch every student. That's all. And I know that that's
so thank you for the question, as does this team, and certainly as does Mr. Rose and his dedicated staff. Know that afternoons are busy at Cat North with the 9th grade programs, as we bring our 9th graders back and forth, and also the evenings. That building is busy until probably 10 o'clock at night, if not later, where the trades are going in and doing work in there and getting their own certifications. And that's part of the business partnership that has been built with the team, with the various business partners to come in and utilize the space as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. So yeah, that's my only dream is that, we always want to do more. So yeah, thank you for all of that. And thank you, Dr. Olato. Of course, I'm going to happily support this when we vote. Thank you.
I see no other lights. I'll just take a moment of privilege. I was thrilled to read this. It was great to have time on the airplane from San Diego to go through the entire report. It is exciting. I, as Ms. Schalheim has said, I cannot speak highly enough of the work that our CAP programs do. I think it's put us ahead of the game with regard to Blueprint and a number of other things that we need, but it is extraordinary education that the young people who attend these programs are receiving. And I think this is a design that will, from everything I can tell, beautifully support that work. And clearly an incredible amount of thought has gone into it. And I will also say, with regard to Dr. Olato's comments about the folks who do the teaching in our CAP programs, this is the original and authentic project-based learning. And that is labor-intensive work, and it requires gifted teachers who love what they do. And it is, frankly, hard to scale. So I think it's extraordinary that we do it at the volume that we do, and we do it as well as we do. And so I just couldn't be more proud, and I'm delighted to see this now moving into this next phase. And a shout out to the principal in Cat North. My family is now spoiled because I toured Cat North just before Christmas and they got cheesecake for their Christmas dessert. And now they think they're getting it every year. So, anyway, so thank you all for I'm sure there are many people who stand behind you for all the work that has gone into this. But I was thrilled to see it. Ms. Schalheim, did you put your light on again?
Best cheesecake
Ever.
ever. Just minor little plug for the culinary folks, my people.
Yes. Okay. Do I have a motion? Oh, we'd already went through that. Okay, Ms. Howell.
Miss Ellis,
Aye.
Miss Corkadell,
Aye.
Miss Schalheim,
Aye.
Miss Dent,
Aye.
Miss Omasore,
Aye.
Mr. Silkworth,
Aye.
Dr. Tobin.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. Item 7.06, Park Elementary School Edition, Educational Specifications. Dr. Olato.
Thank you, Madam President. I recommend approval of the Park Elementary School Edition Educational Specifications.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Seeing no lights, Ms. Howell.
Miss Ellis,
Aye.
Miss Corkadell,
Aye.
Miss Schalheim,
Aye.
Miss Dent,
Aye.
Miss Omasore,
Aye.
Mr. Silkworth.
I graduated from Park.
Yeah.
I did. It's true.
Dr. Tobin.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. Item 7.07, 2021-2022 calendar adjustment, primary election day. Thank you all very much. Dr. Olato.
Thank you, Madam President. I recommend moving the system-wide closure date for primary election day as noted on the 2021-2022 school year calendar from June 28, 2020 to July 19, 2022. I'm sorry, 2022 in June to July 19, 2022, and returning June 28, 2022 to a normal operational day.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Corkadell.
So only one tech question, and that is, we have always adopted the other half of Dr. Olato's recommendation, I believe may require a second motion because it involves altering the 22-23 2023 calendar, and I therefore recommend they get taken separately because we'll be in the new school year in July. And so I'm wondering if we need to do that because we adopted them separately and they are usually altered separately. So if we could just get clarification, and if so, I'm happy to make an amendment to separate the two, or maybe we could just remotion. Or if it's okay, it's okay.
If you give me 1 second, I don't believe we have to because the dates are on the 2021, 2022 calendar. The dates of July are on that calendar. I haven't pulled it up yet, but I see Ms. Ellis may be a step ahead of me. Those dates do exist on the 2021, 22 calendar, correct? So then I don't think we have to move it forward to the next calendar. I think we can adjust this.
So we don't, I thought our calendar ends the last day of June and that we adopt July to June, our calendars.
Mr. Mosher.
I just want to make sure I
Yeah.
got it right.
Your Chief Communications Officer, your fiscal year ends in June, but the calendar you adopt goes from August through July.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Well, then we are okay, and I apologize for taking that time. I am confusing the two.
We
and
learn
that's why
something
I
every
asked-
night.
but that's why I asked it of her, because I was like, wait, I thought that, okay, we're good. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I
have
see
nothing
no
further.
other lights. Okay, we good? All right.
Miss Ellis,
Aye.
Miss Corkadell,
Aye.
Miss Schallheim,
Aye.
Miss Dent,
Aye.
Miss Amasore,
Aye.
Mr. Silkworth,
Aye.
Dr. Tobin.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, thank you. So now moving on to item 8.01, award of review items, award of contracts. So we have before us, you don't need to make a recommendation on that.
Nope, you have the information before you. We're glad to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. I see no lights. Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to item 8.02, Piney Orchard Elementary School capacity. Dr. Arlotto, were you going to present a few thoughts on?
I certainly am glad to.
Yes.
Absolutely. So this is an agenda item that was placed on this evening's agenda by members of the board. So I will really leave it to them to carry the conversation in whatever direction you also choose. But before that begins, let me just provide some basic background information so that we are all on the same page as we move this conversation forward. Piney Orchard Elementary School has a current enrollment of 961 students and a state-rated capacity of 649 students. There is one 8-classroom modular building with built-in restroom facilities on the site. The rise in enrollment at Piney Orchard has been driven by increased development in the western part of the county. This has also resulted in many of the schools within that same region projected to be over capacity and closed to out-of-area transfers. We are in the midst of constructing a new West County Elementary School in the Two Rivers community, which will open in the summer of 2024. Funding has been allocated for the project. The job has been bid and is in the process of being awarded, and we are awaiting all the necessary regulatory approvals required to physically get the project underway. To accommodate expected enrollment increases next year, we plan to install another 8-classroom modular building that will also have restroom facilities so that the students will not have to go back and forth to the main building for that purpose. The playground will be rearranged to accommodate the modular classroom building. Purchase orders have already been issued for the modular classrooms and the accompanying playground adjustments. We are also adding to the staff at the school. Plans call for 7 additional teachers, and if funded in this board's current budget request to the county executive and county council, an additional assistant principal. Our projections next year call for only 2 grades, kindergarten, and fifth to be above target ratios for class size, and those will each be over by 1 or 2 students. The Food and Nutrition Services team has already met at the school and developed sound plans to accommodate the increased number of students. The Facilities and Transportation teams have also met at the school, along with the County Public Works Department and the Police Department, to make improvements to traffic flows and parking accommodations. As you know, there will be a new principal at Piney Orchard next year because Mr. Gruber is retiring. We intentionally made that announcement last month so that the new principal, Ms. Snyder, can work closely with Mr. Gruber on the transition and be fully up to speed as she takes over in July. And with that, I'll leave it to the board. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Ellis.
Thank you. Sorry, just finishing jotting down my notes. So I have been, as many of you know, and I'm sure others can imagine, in communication with many people from the community. We've all received emails, but of course, being in my district, I've reached out to try to work with community members on their concerns. Dr. Arlotto can attest. I've met with him a couple of times. Mr. Cheknovich, there have been some back and forth communications, asking questions. There have been at least a few different proposals that have been sort of put on the table just to see, what the possibilities are. I absolutely, and I know you all are hearing from the community that there's fear that this is, just not doable. There's got to be a tipping point where a school campus simply can't accommodate anymore. We can add classrooms. We could pave over the entire, campus with modules, but unless we're going to add a cafeteria, a library, a gym, play space that is now being taken up, I hear and share the concerns of the community. I'm just going to name a couple of the ideas, and I appreciate everyone who's been thinking out of the box. One of the ideas was to move 5th grade to Arundel Middle School and move 8th grade to Arundel High School for the next couple of years until the new elementary school opens. And I think operationally that was a very viable solution that had a lot of promise, but without the support of the community, I certainly wasn't going to push for any particular solution that the community wasn't getting behind. Another idea that came up was moving Piney Orchard Kindergarten to another school that does have space right now. And that was another, I think, operationally a very doable solution. I want to, another idea was a building that we're using for professional purposes right now that used to be a school, putting kindergarten there. I spoke with Mr. Cheknovich about that, and it's just that building has been closed to students for so long. The amount of work that would go into bringing that building up to code just isn't going to be doable before the new elementary school opens, is what I've been told. So I want, again, to thank everyone for all of your work, particularly the very dedicated parents in the Arundel cluster, particularly the Piney Orchard parents. So I'm here to support you. I'm here to advocate for you. So a couple of questions, Dr. Arlotto. another idea that I want to ask about, like, is this possible? And if not, why not? And I'm sorry I didn't present or ask you about this sooner. It just really came out of a conversation last night, which is, I believe some of our charter schools have operate in less traditional type school buildings, more like what would, the type of construction that would be like an office building. Was leasing space ever explored to cover a couple of years? I don't know what's over in Piney Orchard Shopping Center area, but I know that businesses are using less space. More of them are operating virtually. So could there have been, or could there be any opportunities there?
My initial reaction is no. I'm glad to explore that. And I mean no, because your question is, have you done that in the past? The answer is no.
Mhm.
We've not gone out to leasing agents and look for shopping space, empty warehouses that then we could use for a school. You mentioned charter schools, yes, but they all have to be built to code.
Mhm.
So whether it's a traditional school or charter school, if we move students to another space, it has to meet building code to house children.
Mhm.
And so you would still have to put out to bid for that leasing space. We just couldn't walk in and give somebody a check. As you well know, that's not the way the public schools entities work when we are looking to lease or purchase. And so we would put out to bid. And then based on a bid and a decision of the board, then we would have to build out that space to code to be ready to accept students.
Mhm. Right, which businesses do all the time. I'm sure it doesn't,
I don't want to. Businesses do it all the time. Businesses don't do it all the time to accommodate children.
No, I get that.
It's a whole different
Right.
set of codes to accommodate children during the day. I just want to make
Right.
sure that we're really clear as the public is listening, that you just can't go in and build out space to have offices.
Right. No, I get that. I understand that.
Thank you.
Okay. And then a couple other things. I'm going to ask you about a couple of things that are particular concerns that have come up. We heard tonight from a parent something that I've been hearing, designate or crossing guards being pulled before all the schools are, before all the students are in the school, because it's a lengthy process getting so many students into the elementary school, and those guards are needed at another school. Can we get, knowing that we have students out there walking past the time that we have crossing guards there, can we get designated crossing guards for Piney Orchard? I mean, this is practically like two schools. This is going to be, if it's over 160% capacity, I would like to ask for that.
Okay.
Um,
So again, so that everybody's clear, and this, crossing guards don't work for us. Crossing guards are a department of the Anne Arundel County Police Department, and we work with them. So one, we are already working with them because we're changing school hours next year.
Mhm.
So the crossing guard times are going to have to change.
Oh, right.
And because we are condensing the day, we're condensing the travel time in the morning and the afternoon with the new school hours. It means that there's going to be a need for more crossing guards, and they're already short now. So I can't guarantee that, but we certainly have it on the list. We're already talking about crossing guards with the police department for next year. And as you well know, and the gentleman was 100% correct, many of our crossing guards, because of the window, the almost 2.5 hour window of when we start high schools and finish middle schools, that crossing guards can get to 2 or sometimes 3 sites to cross children. We'll have less ability to do that because we have condensed that travel time, that delivery time in the morning and departure time in the afternoon because of the new school hours. But we'll certainly bring that up with the department.
Okay. Something I was not aware of until recently, and hopefully someone will speak up and correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is, I think there was a fundraiser that went on for building a playground there, and there were bricks that were, I guess, purchased for donation to the project. And now that playground is going to be moved, and parents have asked me what's going to happen with that. Do you know? I mean, they're not going to lose that, are they? Their memorial to that project?
So I've not had this specific conversation with my team, and I will, but in past projects, we have never lost. When we do demolition at a school and we're rebuilding, and there are certain landmarks the school wants to keep, we'll typically save those walls, artwork, those kinds of things. So I would like to think that we'll be able to save the bricks.
Okay. You mentioned adjusting playground. I want to make sure there's no confusion there, because I have heard, I think even tonight we heard someone saying removing a playground, right? Not removing. Am I right about that?
Yes.
Okay. So there will still
Be a playground. Absolutely.
And then thank you for mentioning the assistant principal. That's a big one that I keep hearing about. I guess one of the concerns I keep hearing about, you mentioned 7 teachers, but there are specialists, I guess, language. It's escaping me right now,
Literacy
but
teachers, reading.
literacy. Thank you. That's the word I'm looking for. Literacy teachers, special education. Are you anticipating those to increase when we're again? I don't know, but I'm told that those are at the levels that they were before the school got this big. So are we increasing those?
So we have added some staff this year as a result of the increase, and we'll continue to add staff as needed and also as available. One of the things I did mention are counselors. Our plan is to add a counselor. We have to get funded, right? We have to get your budget funded. But our plan is to also add a counselor. So yeah, we'll look at all the positions. If we need to add an additional member or two to the food and service team, we'll do that. And we do that in schools all the time, but there has to be an availability also of the staffing.
I'm hearing concerns about safety with a lack of or asking for additional emergency exits from the fenced-in area. I guess one way in and one way out is a safety concern for parents. Is that something you can talk with?
Yes. So I'm assuming what you are referring to is when we put modular classrooms, portables at any of our schools, we then, for safety reasons, enclose them with fencing for protection of the students and the staff and the building overall. But there also has to be appropriate egress from that space. You can't exit the main building into a fenced-in area and then not be able to get outside the fenced-in area if necessary. And so that's all dictated by fire code.
Okay.
And so we will, anytime we construct those fences, those plans are approved by the fire marshal and then inspected by the fire marshal. So if there's a single or 2 exits now, I'm sure that number will increase when you add a portable, 8 additional classrooms and X number of students. There is a ratio that the fire department uses, and we'll follow their guidance.
Can you, and I'm sorry, I only have a couple more, Dr. Tobin, that this is, can you elaborate at all on what is being proposed for, to alleviate the parking situation? You say, and I know Mr. Cheknovich has told me that as well, that your staff is working with the county and police, and what is that going to look like? Do we know? I know that there's been a request for a gravel lot to accommodate more cars. Do you know what the solution is looking
We
to
don't. We'll continue to work with DPW, the county, and the police department. So I don't have a plan to share. So whether it's parking immediately on the site or changing the parking restrictions on Strawberry Way Lane in front of the school, and allowing for parking along that route to add parking that would not be
Right.
allowed during the school day, and now different signage and the county allowing us to do that. Those are possibilities that we are discussing.
Okay, and then since the community was unable for, again, understandable reasons to come together on the best, most creative solution, and I mentioned some of those earlier, there's been, it seems to be overwhelming support for asking for some relief in, I think it's in regulations where a school is closed at 90% capacity for out of area transfers. So considering we have a school at 160% over that next year, and considering that, you know, our policy, our goal in redistricting is to balance facilities. We always want balanced facilities. Is it possible for you to, I guess, waive that 90% for Piney Orchard families who would like to and are willing to transport their students to another school until we get a new school open?
And which families would which families would those be, and how many would you expect?
It would be on a volunteer basis.
Right.
Yes.
Because we wouldn't require anybody.
Of course
I'm
not.
curious to know what your thoughts are on who they would be. So it would just be any grade level?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And how many?
Well, I think as long as I don't have a number like cut off at this point, but I don't think we're going to have enough volunteers that are going to get Piney Orchard below 110%. So if we could get as many families as possible to spread out and balance those facilities, that would be ideal. I think the two barriers are the current 90% capacity in the regulations, and the other one is the I think it's May 1st might be the deadline, and if that could be extended a little bit so that families can be communicated to, given this option and time to make adjustments and make a decision for their family. I think that would be, I think that seems to be the solution that has the most support. And look, with all of those ideas that came forward, I had people reach out to me personally and say, I have a fifth grader, I would have sent my kid to the middle school, but most of the families did not support that. I have a kindergartner, I would have sent them to another school. So there's definitely going to be, I think, volunteers, because there's families that just don't want their children going to school in that situation with a school so over capacity. So I would ask, can you please, I guess, waive that portion of the regulation for in this situation, not across the school system.
So I'll certainly talk with my team about that.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
I'm so sorry. I have one more question.
Okay.
I told I would ask this. So building a new school is a very lengthy process, obviously, and there's a lot of steps, and you can't miss any steps. But I know that these families are also reaching out and letting our county officials know that this is a dire situation. We're talking the 23-24 school year is still over a year away. Is there no way for everyone in the process to come together and speed that up?
Not that we're aware of. So the teams looked at it. So what you're asking is, and I'm going to use my words, if we could get the county to forward fund the building,
Mhm.
could we do it in a year?
Mhm.
And the answer is no. We could not build the building properly in a year
And that's
because
under,
of all those steps and processes that you just mentioned.
right. I didn't know. I guess my question is there a way, like, in other words, okay, we've applied for this permit. The normal timeline is this. Can it not all be, there's no way to pursue that?
Well, I guess you're going to have to pursue first the funding.
Okay.
We'll have to pursue first the funding,
Mhm.
and then I don't think permitting is really the issue. I think it's actually building the building is the issue, right? You just because you have the money doesn't mean you can build it faster necessarily.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Schalheim.
So my heart goes out to Piney Orchard families in this situation. I'm very much empathetic, and I hear you. I get all your emails, even if I'm too busy to respond. Know that they're read. Know that you're heard. You know, I have to. I'm bound to back board decisions when they occur. I think you know which decision I'm speaking of. I wasn't personally in favor of that decision, and this is the reason why I wasn't in favor of it. That being said, I'm really interested and supportive of the ideas and the commentary that's come out of this discussion tonight, presented by Ms. Ellis. And, you know, it's not my decision, it's an operational decision. But if it was my decision, I would definitely be supportive of, you know, looking at the 90% threshold and waiving that and moving the deadline and really trying to give some relief for all the reasons discussed. Again, not my lane, but just my personal opinion, I would be supportive of that. If it were my lane, I would be pursuing that. And it just, you know, I have an elementary school kid. I think, no, Miss Frank does too. So, I could not imagine my daughter's school being that big. And my daughter's school is closed and is likely north of 90% because it is closed. And to get in and out of that school on a good day is hellacious. So I just know that I'm here and I'm listening. I'll be supportive in any way that I can in my capacity as a board member, which, as you know, there are lanes. Daily school operations is not my lane, nor should it be. It's the superintendent's lane. But, you know, if he were ever to ask my opinion if I would be supportive of X, Y, or Z, even though it's not my lane, of course I would say, well, yeah, you know, we should look at whatever we can and think outside the box and think creatively, because I just couldn't imagine. And I appreciate your willingness to be here for this many hours and wait it out with us till we get to this till we got to this agenda item. So, I mean, this was why I saw this train coming, and here we are. And I'm although I have to backboard decision, this was my concern from the start. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Corkadell.
Thank you, Dr. Tobin, and thank you, Dr. Arlotto, for sharing the information, and for Ms. Ellis for advocating for your district. Someone who represented them in a slightly different capacity, I'm very familiar. And I just want to say that, you know, after we did our last redistricting that was relevant to this, things have changed. And there's a housing inventory shortage that has accelerated some of the newer development being brought online, and some other things that simply made the forecasting, as good as it is, not able to well capture all of the contingencies and externalities that we have since faced. That being said, I appreciate Ms. Ellis doing her due diligence in many of these matters. And I have been to Piney Orchard since, and to the other affected schools. And yes, we've got a serious problem. We also have a solution that is funded. And in the meantime, though, I did have a couple questions as it related. So, Dr. Arlotto, I know from time to time, our cafeterias are able to set up additional lanes and expresses for lunches. In the course of, I mean, we're almost through the course of this school year, but I'm wondering, are there any opportunities based on the facility to maybe see if we can, if there's something we haven't missed for preparation for next year? That, or have you guys gone through that, or?
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely.
Okay.
We've gone through it. Ms. Reese and her team have visited the school. They know the school well. They know what their capabilities are. We will be adding two, for lack of better terms, because I don't have a technical term for it, two card swipe machines that will expedite, because we will be having to enter in student ID numbers next year. It's not all free meals, unfortunately. That comes to an end at the end of this June 2022. And so one of the upgrades will be, we'll add card swipe machines, two of them, where the students will have cards in advance. Their teachers will help manage, and they'll be able to swipe through, and that will help us with timing and help us with any kind of backup in the serving lines.
As a follow-up to that, and I'm wondering, because I don't want to dig into the regs or how we operate or anything, but I'm just wondering, for those who have health conditions, whether it's for diabetes or other similars, if maybe we could try to find a way to get them to the front of the line, or similarly, if there's a health condition that this is impacting. I mean, normally the parent would reach out and you guys would work with them, but I'm just wondering, under the circumstances, and we've had a couple unique years, that maybe we take a look at that. Thank you. I do want to just point out, I think we do have in policy opportunities, if it does make sense, on a side under JAB. So I do look forward to hearing some of the outcomes of that, because there's a couple different approaches we can take. We're currently under construction right now, and so it appears that we can make some exceptions. But I'm wondering, just to add to Ms. Ellis's inquiry, if we can't do a, hey, open it up if you want to move. And quite honestly, I wasn't even thinking about that. But what I was thinking about is, we do from time to time get requests to leave one school to go to the other. And it seems like it may make sense for us to honor requests out of Piney Orchard as they relate to schools that may be at or exceeding capacity in our regular course of transfer applications, not opening up or doing special announcing. But I'm just wondering if we could maybe be a little flexible for those families. Be a couple students is better than nothing. And then lastly, this is more for our board. I'm going to make a suggestion. We have our state legislative stuff that we adopt and approve, and we have our budget sitting out there. Crossing guards and nurses are not in our wheelhouse, and SROs. Those are the three big things that are in our schools, our actual school buildings, that we don't control the funding, nor do we control the staffing ability. We coordinate very, very closely. We have awesome relationships and have done outstanding work. Crossing guards has always been one of those things. I've sat next to our security guy, and even on the county side, advocating to try to find better ways of recruiting. This was something that goes well before COVID. But I think maybe us as a board in this particular situation may want to consider taking a formal position on the crossing guards line item for the county in this particular. And just like we do with other legislation, and budget is legislation, and other budget initiatives, consider submitting a formal statement of of the ask, because it doesn't have to be Piney Orchard. I can think off the top of my head of a couple dozen places where I know we would greatly benefit from safety security. We have those overlaps. I got one in Crofton in the Triangle where I have one crossing guard and shared. And our kids stay safe. Our community well supports it. And I always encourage that it's about a community. But Dr. Tobin, I don't know how that would be approached, but I'm wondering if there's a way we could convey that prior to the county executive actually finalizing his version of the budget. And we're on short order here. They're going to be making their adjustments within the next 3 to, I'm looking over at Alex, maybe 3 to 10 days. It'll go in front of the Planning Advisory Board for on the capital side, any adjustments for the state. And then they're kind of locked in those last couple weeks is tweaking. So if at the appropriate time, I'm happy to make a motion of support or instruct, although it's going to be on the fly and take me a minute. But just seeing some of these things, when I hear safety, I want to jump on it. Of all the things that we're working towards, small and large, to try to alleviate, I think this one's timely. So I'll defer for other questions of members and at the appropriate
Yeah,
time.
I've got a couple more lights and then I'll come back to you, okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Silkworth.
Thank you, Dr. Tobin. My heart also goes out to all the parents, students, and their families in the Piney Orchard school who have sent emails to us. But I also must say that my heart goes out to all of our other schools that also are experiencing some overcrowding issues. I have a couple comments. One is that as a school teacher and an advocate for many years, I always reached out to the teachers as I was working with the principal, to the teachers when we had issues, the teachers who teach our kids, because they always come up with help, ideas, suggestions, and guidance when we have issues like this. They never failed me. I'm going to read something to you from an email that I got. Moving a grade level is not the answer. It would be a staffing nightmare, overwhelm another school, use up all of their resources, and Piney would still be stuck with the same issues. Piney Orchard just needs more resources to handle this additional influx of students. While I appreciate parents being concerned, they have no clue what it is like on a daily basis and don't understand the challenges that come with moving an entire grade level. If we get these additional resources, then we can manage the next 2 years. The good news for Piney Orchard is there's light at the end of the tunnel. Dr. Alada and his staff have come up with many recommendations. My recommendation is that we continue this collaborative effort, that we have more conversations with teachers at Piney Orchard, because they are the ones that know. By the way, what I read from you was from a 3rd grade teacher from Piney Orchard.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Dent.
Thank you, Dr. Tobin. My concern is a lot to do with overcrowding in itself and the significant issues that surround overcrowding. I can agree that having all of the comments that I've heard this evening is important. I just don't think that we have addressed the real issue that I'm concerned about, which is how do we fix the overcrowding? I got it that it occurred because of the redistricting, no fault of anything. We are where we are right now. What I don't see is even when we address or put more portals out there, that it's really going to address the overcrowding. I certainly don't think we can wait until 2024. Maybe being in the construction world is a little bit different. You never know what's going to happen. The predictability is 2024. That's not saying that that's going to happen in 2024. Let's just say what we have on a prediction list. Is there not a way for us to put together a team that can actually do 100% overall assessment of all the encompassing problems and then have a definitive solution, because I think we're band-aiding it the way we're going right now. That's one. The second one is I think that all of the families at Piney Orchard, that we can have a town hall that we can actually tell them what's going on, sit down with all of them and explain to them that we not only do we hear them, we hear the teachers, we hear everyone that's there. There's no question that overcrowding is a problem. What's a bigger problem for me is that the overcrowding is not going to go away. It's going to continue. And so while you and your staff is going to continue to try to accommodate, it needs a holistic approach to it. And I just don't feel like we've addressed that right now. So I would certainly like to see any way that we could work together to come up with a plan and then present it to the families and the faculty that's there at Piney Orchard.
May I?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mrs. Dent. So we are band-aiding it, to use your term, because that's what we're left with. It is, that's what we're left with. We are a public school system. So when families move into the area, they get to go based on board policy. Those children get to go to their neighborhood school. We're not happy about the growth at Piney Orchard. Well, I shouldn't say that. We're delighted to have the families in Piney Orchard and in Anne Arundel County Public Schools. But the excessive sort of uncontrolled growth, we saw coming. We attempted to put the elementary school we're building now 2 superintendents ago. And the board at the time said no. So we saw it. This team, Mr. Shaknovich and others, and our demographers saw the growth coming. And we attempted to secure the property. And the board at the time, for I'm sure all the right reasons, but 2 superintendents ago chose not to construct that building. So we are, as people have said, we are where we are. So now we are, our job now is to support the school, the students, the staff, the community as best we can. So I don't have a better solution. If I had an empty building that I could move students to and divide the school, we would do that. We don't have an empty building to do that can accept students. We will staff it as best we can so that the students are safe and secure. If we need to add administrators or food and nutrition service staff, we'll do that. The classrooms themselves are not overcrowded. Beginning next year, with the added space that we're going to add, 8 classrooms, additional teachers, the class size ratios are going to be better at Piney Orchard than a number of their neighboring schools around them in that area, in either the Rundle and the Crofton clusters, because we're adding, in short order, 8 classrooms, right? Normally it would take us a year and a half to build that and add that addition, and we're able to do that over the course of the summer. None of this, and don't get me wrong, none of this is ideal. It's not where any of us want to be. We had hoped that we would have had the 2 Rivers building constructed and occupied years ago, but it didn't work that way. And then as development went on, it took us some time to work with the county to find a piece of property that the county would purchase for us that was suitable for an elementary school and turn over to us, which is something Mr. Shaknovich has been working on with the county development office for years. None of those are excuses, because to your point, we are where we are. We have all these students. So now we need to do our level best. We need to do our very best to support the students in that building and give them all the resources that they need, and the staff as well, so that we can have a quality the next 2 school years until the new building is built. We're in a very, very unfortunate situation that none of us want to be in.
Ms. Ellis, did you have another light, or is that your old light?
I do. Two quick things. Yeah, I heard a bit about that history. I believe that school was funded at that time. Correct?
Yes, ma'am. I don't have the details in front of me. That was some time ago, and I was with this system, but not the superintendent. But it was a unique third-party project in which a developer was going to supply the land and build the building for us.
And then real quick, just, I mean, what's on my mind is all these operational concerns, and just how to best protect our students and have them have a healthy school day. The lunch has me greatly concerned. First of all, we have students arriving at the school who are eating lunch, I think less than half an hour after less than an hour and a half after they get there. And, eating is it's not a math equation. It's it's supposed to be, when your body needs nourishment. That has me concerned, but I'm hearing a lot of concerns about how little time students have to eat. So in addition, I know Ms. Corkadell touched on creative solutions. And I absolutely think students need to get up and move about, not sit in their desk all day. But if there's any way that there could be a rotational basis where not all students eat in the cafeteria, but have, food brought to them other places. Again, I'm not advocating for them sitting in their desk all day, but please look for creative solutions to just look at. I'm just asking everyone involved, please look at this through the eyes of a child and make this as healthy as possible for our students in every way. Thank you.
Ms. Schulheim.
Just one more thing about staffing. It's not just, it's not just the homeroom teacher who's also, if they're departmentalizing, it's also the ELA or the math, or I don't know if they are or not at that particular school. But it's also, it's also cultural arts and media and all the things that bring, a richness to the school day. And I'm not sure if those staffing levels are where you would ideally want them to be given the enrollment or not, but just look at that too. And again, my heart bleeds.
I'll come back to you, Ms. Corkadell, but I just wanted to say a couple of words. Yes, we have received your emails. We've heard you. I know this is incredibly difficult for the families. And as you've heard, we have been and we continue to explore every avenue that's available to us. But given the history we've also heard here, I would like to ask the public who may still be listening. Budgets matter. We have families come and advocate before us for things like the Piney Orchard, and we're grateful that you do. But I would hope that families also understand that sometimes it's the decisions made years before that get us where we are. So I said when we passed our budget this year, this is the real cost of education. And I hope people who care about this on behalf of our children, all of our children, understand that funding education is one of the most critical things we can do if we really care about our children. And often we always have to make tough choices. Nobody can get everything. But I think we have to understand that when we cut corners or kick things down the road, there are real consequences. Unfortunately, the families of Piney Orchard are bearing some of those consequences right now, as you've just heard the superintendent say. And so I just think it's an important moment to remember that please keep advocating for your schools, not just when things are rough as they are right now, but at all moments. This is what our children need from us so that we can provide them what they need, because that's what all of us want.
To the county council.
Well,
county
yes.
executive.
So the next story is, of course, We pass a budget, it's now before the county executive. After that, it will go to the county council. That's the case every single year. Now, when you have something before you, but don't forget about it next year or the year after, because all of these things matter. But thank you again for coming. Thank you for your advocacy. Thank you for speaking up for your community and your children. We hear you, and we are going to do everything in our power to find whatever creative solutions we can to get everybody through this time. Ms. Corkadell.
Thank you, President Tobin. I just sent Diane the language. I'm going to say it out loud. And I actually sent you two, and then I caught myself in a tech error edit, so it'd be the second one. And it's very simple. We're not going to get into the weeds, hopefully, on this. It can still, we still got 14 minutes to end this on a 10 p.m. note, folks, and I'm determined to do it. So here we are. I move that the Board of Education formally communicate to the County Executive and County Council their interest and support for all currently proposed crossing guards funding and request additional crossing guard FTE/PTE positions to alleviate the ongoing short staffing to ensure we are best supporting our student safety. Further, that the president work with the superintendent and staff to develop the communications details and promptly deliver it to the county executive and county council.
I'll second that.
Self-explaining.
Any comment? I see no lights. We have a motion and we have, sorry, Ms. Ellis.
I'm going to support it. I wish I
Your
had-
light's not your, yeah, there you go.
I'll support the motion. I just have to say, I wish I had a motion that was going to solve all this.
Seeing no more lights, Ms. Howell.
Does anyone want me to repeat the motion? Okay. Ms. Ellis,
Aye.
Ms. Corkadell,
Aye.
Ms. Schallheim,
Aye.
Ms. Dent,
Aye.
Ms. Omasore,
Aye.
Mr. Silkworth,
Aye.
Dr. Tobin.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Move to adjourn.
Yes. Let me just alert everyone to the fact that the next board meeting will be Wednesday, April 20th, and the next board meeting will in fact be a noon meeting. The night and day meetings were flipped for this month. Policy committee meeting will be Tuesday, May 3rd. Equity committee will be Tuesday, May 10th. Budget committee will be Tuesday, April 19th. And with that, I see consensus, I believe, for adjournment. Good night, everyone.
Mm-hmm.